Good evening, everyone here and all our viewers at home. Welcome to the August 10th work session for the town of Newcastle. Can I get a motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so before we kick things off, is there anything you'd like to share, Jill, or should we go right into the annual comprehensive financial report?
Let's start with our PAFR.
All right, come on down.
Rob Deary is here, along with Alan Cassay from O'Connor Davies. There's always a long name.
I always look forward to your
Yeah,
positive
O'Connor Davies.
outlook and
It
accolades.
was positive.
All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, I understand there are some new board members, so I briefly want to go through the financial statements.
Absolutely.
Brief. I'd like to start on page Roman numeral 3. I think you're issuing a CAFR, which is no longer called a CAFR anymore, by the way. It's called an annual comprehensive financial report. So instead of a CAFR, it's an AFRA. The best we can do.
I'm laughing underneath.
Well, we weren't laughing, but anyway, on page 3, it's what's known as the letter of transmittal. It's prepared by management, and basically it discusses the overall picture of the town. Some financial, talks about all the demographics, and so forth. That's prepared by management. I'm not going to discuss that. On page 14, is your certificate of achievement that you received for the 2019. Back then it was a CAFR, so I'll say CAFR. And that's the 23rd consecutive year that the town has received this award, which is really quite an accomplishment.
And recently for Rob, thank you,
Hey,
Rob.
Rob.
But if you really look at this, I mean, starting on page, let me just see. Starting on page 87 to the end, is all the statistical information that Rob and his department have to compile in order to receive this award. And it's 10 years' worth of financial information. Okay. After that, I'd like to turn to the first page, the next page, which is the independent auditor's report. I'll go through that briefly. Basically, the first paragraph talks about what we did.
What
We
page,
audited.
sorry? What page?
It doesn't have a page.
It's like the
Page one.
first page after the Roman numerals, page 1.
Two pages.
Thank you.
Okay, the first paragraph basically talks about what we did. We audited the accompanying financial statements. The next paragraph talks about management's responsibility, which is responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. The auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion based on our audit, which if you flip the page, you'll find our opinion. And this is an unmodified opinion. It's also known as a clean opinion. It's the best opinion you can receive. Then in the current year, there's this emphasis of matter
Can you please
paragraph.
talk into the microphone? People at home can't hear you.
Okay. There's an emphasis of matter paragraph, which we added this year because of COVID-19.
Is it on, Karen?
I'm sorry.
It is on, isn't it?
It must be because of the mask.
The mask. I can take it off. Basically, in the note 4, it just says that even though there were certain revenues that were affected by COVID-19, our opinion is not modified as a result of that. And then there's some other required supplementary information, which obviously is required, which you have to submit in order to get the CAFR. Okay, starting on page 4 is the management discussion and analysis, which again is prepared by Rob. And this deals more with the financial highlights that occurred during the current year. And it's really, it's pretty much in somewhat layman terms, and it's really very comprehensive. Next, I'd like to go to page 17, because there are two different types of statements in this report. On page 17, you have what's known as the statement of net position, and this is on the full accrual basis, meaning if you look at the assets section, you'll see you have capital assets listed there. They do not appear in the governmental funds. They only appear here. And then if you go down to the liabilities, you'll see you have non-current and long-term liabilities. That's all your bonds, your other post-employment benefit obligations, and so forth. And if you go to the bottom, you'll see on the bottom you have a total net position of a negative 12.4 million. And the line above it is the unrestricted net position, which is a negative 61 million. And that's all the result of primarily the other post-employment benefit obligations, which has a liability at the end of the year of $86 million. But regarding the OPEB, the town actually only expended $2.4 million for that expense in 2020. Okay? So this information is required by GASB, and the intent was, when they first came out with this about 10 years ago, GASB statement number 34, the Government Accounting Standards Board, was to put all municipalities that issue debt on a level playing field with other entities that issue debt, because the rest of your financials are on the modified accrual basis. So all the long-term debt is not included in that, and your capital assets are not included in that. So they basically wanted a level playing field for anybody who's purchasing debt, to compare apples to apples, and that's the intent. Okay. If you could flip over to page 19 and 20, this is the balance sheet for all your governmental funds. And you'll notice that there are 4 funds that are listed out separately: the general fund, the highway fund, the special districts funds, which are all combined into one, and the capital projects fund. Those are considered major funds because of a formula also dictated by GASB. So those are major funds, and they're dealt with differently when we do our audit. And then you have one non-major governmental fund, which is the special purpose fund. Okay? And now, if you want to turn to the real story, if you turn to page 63 and 64, this is the general fund comparative schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, budget, and actual. The top portion of the page, you have your revenues, and the information you're looking at is a roll-up. The details for this is on pages 65 and 66. But basically, you had your original budget, your final budget, the actual results, and then the variance with the final budget. So for your revenues, the variance with the final budget had a negative variance of 1.8 million. And if you look in the departmental income line, you'll see that there's a negative variance of almost $1.8 million. And that's from the COVID, directly related to COVID-19, for the parking lot fees and the park and rec fees. Okay? Those two items had a negative variance of 1.7 million alone, just those two alone. But there were some good things. The non-property taxes, the line above it, was your sales tax, and that was up from the prior year. And your fines and forfeitures, again, that was down, again, due to COVID. The court was closed, there's no activity, there's no revenue. The state aid was up slightly, and the federal aid was down a little bit. But overall, your revenues were down about 1.8 million. And as we just mentioned, due to the parking lot fees and the parks and recs, that's 1.7 of the total.
So it goes to show that how the value of those parking and
Oh, the parks,
a
absolutely.
vacant parking lot not generating anything.
Right. Okay. So, and let's put it this way, aside from those two revenues, your negative variance of 1.8 million is directly attributable to those, which is directly a result of COVID, which means that had that not occurred and everything was normal, your budget, which was prepared on a very conservative basis, which is the way it should be, because your revenues, aside from your property taxes, are obviously the one thing that you can count on. Everything else is unreliable. There's no guarantee for any of your revenues. On the expenditure side, again, it's a roll-up, and the details are on page 67 to 69. And you'll see that the revenues, if you look across to page 64, that the total revenues for 2020 were $20,024,000, and the prior year they were $21,659,000. Okay, so your expenditures were down as well, And that was because the town saw what was happening in 2020. They implemented certain cost-cutting measures, which was the smart thing to do. Some obviously were affected by COVID, but others, you basically implemented some, holdbacks. And as I've always said, the expenditure side of the budget is the only side that you could really control, okay, which is what you did. And if you look at the culture and rec, that was down about $230,000 from the prior year. The employee benefits were down almost $700,000, and that was from your, all from the medical piece, okay, because of the consortium. So you did very well there. The principal on the debt service was down about $300,000, and that's due to the timing of the repayment of your long-term debt. And so the total expenditures were down about $1.6 million. Okay, so that's somewhat of an offset to the expenditures. And then if you look at the line that says net change in fund balance, that bracketed $650,000, included in that is $500,000 that you took from the 19 fund balance to balance the 20 budget. Basically saying that you anticipate using $500,000, the other $150,000 are encumbrances. But basically what they are saying is you anticipated using $500,000 of your fund balance if everything balanced out to zero. In actuality, you generated a surplus of $158,000. So on an overall budgetary basis, you have a positive variance of $807,000, okay? So if you take the $157,000 positive change, you add it to the fund balance at the beginning of the year of 11.4, you ended the year with a total fund balance of almost 11.6 million. Any questions? If you flip back one page, to page 62, this is the general fund balance sheet, and I just basically want to focus on the bottom portion of the page, which is the fund balance. You'll see that the overall total fund balance increased from 11.4 million to almost 11.6 million. And the non-spendable, which are your prepaid expenditures, increased a little under $1 million. The restricted is your reserve for debt service. And for the last couple of years, you've been utilizing that reserve to pay down your debt as opposed to raising taxes. So in 19, you used 150,000, in 20, you're using 150. The assigned fund balance went from 500,000 to 1.2 million, because also what you did, you took an additional 700,000 out of fund balance this year to bump up the appropriation to balance the 21 budget to 1.2 million. Okay? And that left you with an unassigned fund balance of 7.9 million, which is a little over 30% of your 21 appropriations. And according to the state controller and most other places, anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25% is good. And this will certainly reinforce your AAA rating. Okay? I'd like to just turn back to page 44. Because as I said, which is the long-term liabilities, this is all your long-term debt. The top portion have all the bonds that were issued. And then if you look at the other post-employment benefit obligations, that's the calculation for the health expense that the town has at this point in time for all current and retired employees. It's an actuarial calculation, and at the end of the year, it's almost $86 million. But the number to the left of that, the maturities and or payments, the 2.4, is what you actually expended. And that's the number that goes in your budget. Okay, so don't be thrown off by the $86 million.
Bless you.
Okay. Lastly, I'd like to turn to page 55. Which is a summary of the fund balance for all of your governmental funds. Basically, the left-hand column is the general fund, which we just went over. You have your highway fund, your special districts, your capital projects, and again, the special purpose. And on the right-hand side of the page is the 2019 activity. Okay? So overall, despite COVID-19, how it affected the town in terms of its revenues, you did very well. You had a positive fund balance, and surplus in your general fund. Your unassigned fund balance is healthy, and you're in pretty good shape. Hopefully, things in 2021 are going to get better, and some of the revenues will rebound. But I'm sure the finance department and Jill and the board are on top of things, and I don't anticipate any issues. So, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And did you tested, I'm sure, our internal controls and everything
Absolutely.
everything was good?
Everything was good. There was a management letter that we issued. I think there was basically, in the management letter, you potentially have 3 types of deficiencies: material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and control deficiencies. The letter had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. There were a few control deficiencies. One had to do with the special districts fund. The fund balance for most of the special districts is somewhat excessive. In some cases, it's greater than their annual budget. And these control deficiencies, for the most part, are information for the board, just to be made aware of. That's one.
And Alan, just let me chime in there and I'll comment when we talk
Sure.
about the fund balance and some of these special district funds, in particular the water fund, where we have several multi-million-dollar projects coming up.
Right.
It has been high, we're aware of that. Another one of the funds that has a significant fund balance is the refuse fund. We know what's happening with the contract coming up. We hope to use some of that fund balance to offset. And if you recall, over the last several years, the general fund balance, if you see, it had been up close to 40%, it's now around 30%. That was a planned drawdown to pay off some of the debt associated with the downtown project and some other borrowings. So, this is all expected.
The special purpose fund, there were inactive trusts during the year, which is understandable because there's no activity. And the other comment is the capital projects fund, which has been around for a while. Because I know when Rob came on board at the town with the capital projects fund and the project lane schedule, which does not appear in your financials, he was left with, to put it mildly, a mess. I know they've been working on it and they're very close to wrapping it up. So in the next few years, we'll probably see a project lane schedule. And basically it's good because it just lists all the projects that the board authorizes, the authorization, the revenue source, and the expenditures. So you can keep track of each project and it will appear in your financials. It's not a required statement, but it is something, it's very good information for the board to have. And I know Rob is working on it, and
Yeah, and I'll comment
close.
on that as well. So what he's talking about is tracking the project from beginning to end. We have done that with every borrowing since I've been here. There were borrowings that went way back that we are trying to tie way back out to everything, and I think Alan would concur that everything we borrowed since I've been here has been accurately reported and tracked.
That's correct. So overall, the audit went very well prepared. There were no issues, no disagreements, and the town's in good shape. We weathered the storm.
Thank you very much.
Good job, Rob.
Good?
Great.
I'm good.
Nothing but compliments.
Very good.
Thank you.
Also compliments on the documentation around this, as everything's very clearly presented, and
Thank you.
appreciated that, having being new to the process.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's a good report. So,
Thank you very much.
very well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. We're good to see you.
Thank you.
Next time without a mask. All right, Rob, you want to add anything else, Rob? You don't want to add anything else?
No,
Good, okay.
I think Alan represents the financial statements. We've been talking about this for probably the last 6 months. The statements bear out where I have indicated that the town was. I'm looking at numbers so far for this year, and everything is looking very good. We had a financial update, I think it was a month or two ago, where we talked to the board. There will be another one coming up maybe in September, I believe, once we have some more of the numbers in. Sales tax numbers looked great for the first quarter of the year, first 2 quarters of the year that we received. Mortgage tax, the first of 2 payments, was almost where we expected. The 50% payment was almost what the full year budget expectation was. So
Terrific.
I know there's a little bit of uncertainty in the air right now for some of the other variable revenue sources. The parking permits is one that's up in the air. We did reflect that in the budget. We did lower that significantly. The typical budget is between $950,000 and $1 million. We dropped that to $500,000 this year. I know from early in the year we've got about 100 to 150. It's over 100, close to 150,000 already recognized, and the renewal happens in December. So if we, we've got to bring in about 350,000 in December to hit that goal. Other than that, I'm not very concerned with revenue sources. Expenditures seem right on target. We typically, as you see last year, we did a great job with that, 2.8 million below budget. But if you look back through the last several years of financial statements, we're typically really close on expenditures, if not a little bit under. So I think we're definitely still heading in the right direction.
Super. Thank you. Okay. So for our next work session topic, which probably what most people are here for, is the FGEIS selected sections for review. We have Bonnie with us here today. We also have Sabrina here with us today. So I'll give the floor to Bonnie. And before I do so, just so clarity of what the purpose of this is, for those of you here and those who are listening at home, it's not whether necessarily you disagree with something, it's whether it's accurate, whether it's been done well, and the questions have been answered. Again, not whether you agree about a particular issue, it's whether they've addressed it and they've addressed it well. Ed, if you want to make any comment as to that end.
No, I think you hit the buzzwords, which are adequacy and accuracy. Those actually come from the secret regulation. So it's a very different exercise than I understand the board had at the last work session, where you were looking at the revisions to the draft legislation. Here you're looking at the draft responses to the substantive comments that were received on the FGEIS. So again, you're looking to see that those responses are adequate and that they're accurate.
Thank you. And for those who want to speak either online or here during the town board meeting, you'll have the opportunity to do so. All right,
Do you want
Bonnie.
to mention that we only are talking about a couple sections that we got
That's-
back, not the whole thing?
That's correct. So the sections we're reviewing are the table of contents for the natural resources and the cultural resources. This is not a complete and total review of the entire thing. And that's important for everyone to recognize as well. But there will be opportunities further to discuss that. Bonnie,
Okay,
you're up, Bonnie.
you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a little bit of the detail on where we are in the process and what's going on with the form-based code. Hold on, let me just make sure I got the right one. Okay, is my screen appearing?
It is.
Okay, great. Slide this over. So my name is Bonnie Von Olson. I'm with Kimley Horn, planning consultant here in White Plains, and we've been working for the town and doing the New York State Environmental Quality Review process for the form-based code proposal. There we go. So I'm just going to do a little recap for the board and also for everyone that's listening, just to sort of try to high level refresh everyone's memory on where we are with this. So the proposed action is the adoption of new legislation in the business districts in Chappaqua. The lead agency for this process is the Newcastle Town Board, and to satisfy the seeker review, a generic environmental impact statement was prepared. That comes in the form of a draft and a final, and we're up to the final at this point. A generic EIS versus a project site-specific EIS, just to refresh everyone's memory on that. A generic was conducted because this is not a development proposal, it's legislation. And a generic impact statement looks at overall generalized impacts and identifies a maximum build-out condition in order to understand and assess the magnitude of impacts and present thresholds on all the various different topics. Therefore, it's different than one you might see for a site-specific development project. And so the draft GEIS has been prepared, and we're now up to the final GEIS. And the final step of the seeker process will be the environmental findings, which is basically the conclusions that are drawn from those two documents, and the entirety of those complete the seeker process and the environmental record. So to date, project started in May 2019, and the first 6 months, basically, the project started and the draft code itself was developed, the draft legislation. And in January 2020, the environmental quality review process was initiated on the draft legislation. There was a public scoping period from January to April 2020, and then the DGEIS was prepared based on the outline that was developed during the scoping process. And in September 2020, the DGEIS was deemed complete by the lead agency and circulated to the public for comment. And the comment period was opened. There were public hearings on the DGEIS, a total of 6 dates between October and February. And then after the public hearing process was closed, there was a written comment period, which was held open until March 25th. And then just recently, we've been working with the town and have submitted draft sections of the FGEIS, and that's where we are now. These sections are being reviewed for adequacy and completeness. So the final generic environmental impact statement is different than the draft. The draft really was, as I said, describes an outline of impacts, mitigations of the action. And the final is really a response to comments document. According to seeker, a final EIS must consist of the draft EIS, including any necessary revisions and supplements, and copies of the substantive comments received and their sources, and the lead agency's response to those comments. So the FGEIS is prepared by the town's consultant team and provides responses to all the substantive comments received during the hearings and the written comment period. The FGEIS also, an important point about it, it sets forth the thresholds by topic in each section, which are derived from the impact analyses set forth in the DGEIS. And so at this point, the role of the lead agency, which is the Newcastle Town Board, is to review the responses provided to all the substantive comments and evaluate whether those answers provided are responsive to the comment and complete. So specifically, the table of contents for the FEIS contains an introduction, and then the bulk of the report is really the comments and responses. The topics that you see here are the same topics that were evaluated in the EIS, and in the same order to, have consistency. So if a comment was received on natural resources or cultural resources, it would go in section D and section G. Those are the two technical sections that have been submitted for review at this point, in addition to an outline, the table of contents, just for so the board can understand the totality of the document. The appendices will include every single one of the transcripts from the hearing dates, and they're all annotated as to who said what and where those comments were responded to. The same with all the written comments that were received. There were a total of 512 letters or emails from agencies and the public. They are also all annotated and categorized. And then there's some new information in order to respond to the comments that have to do with traffic, sanitary sewer, market feasibility, code revisions, and so forth. So we thought maybe a way to show you how the whole book is organized would be to give you an example of a response to a comment. This is a page from the list of the commenters, and these are letters 177 through 192. And I just took number 185 to show as an example is the letter from the Westchester County Planning Board in November 2020. So in order to find out where your letter is or where your comments are, first they're all listed in the table of contents. And then each letter, you can see this is a 5-page letter, but I just pulled one page out. And all of the letters are categorized, as you can see here, the comment is outlined in red, and then on the right-hand side, the first 2 comments, let's see, are relative to utilities and infrastructure, so they're going to be in section E. The next 2 are going to be in section B because they relate to zoning. And then the second to last one relates to cultural resources. And then the last one is miscellaneous, where all the other comments that didn't fall into one of the original categories are addressed. And then we take that comment, the one that was at the bottom of the page on the previous slide, then that is now on section G, and it's comment G1. And here you see it's letter number 185 from Westchester County Planning Board, and the comment is set forth, and then the response. So that gives you an example of how the document's set up, and I hope that was clear. And so where we are now, the responses in each section are being reviewed by the town board, council, planning department, town staff, and will be returned to the consultant team for revision prior to the acceptance of those responses for the circulation to the public. This is after the FGEIS is circulated. The final step is preparation of environmental finding statement, which I mentioned earlier. And that would close the seeker process. And the proposed code or revised code will not be considered for any vote until the seeker process is complete, which occurs upon adoption of the finding statement. So there's still several more steps to go through. The immediate next steps, town board is going to continue to review the FGEIS sections. There's another workshop scheduled for August 30th, and there are also community engagement sessions scheduled for September 23rd and 24th.
22nd.
I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Sorry about that. So that's basically all I had to present this evening. So if the board has any particular questions on either what I presented or on the specific sections 2D, which is natural resources, and 2G, which is cultural resources, we could open up to that. Or Ed, or if anyone else had anything to add that I missed.
Bonnie, when do you anticipate that we're going to receive other sections?
We're working back and forth with the town and the staff, with, me as the lead on my end and Sabrina basically the lead on her end. There were 10 or 12 sections, and we've gotten through 4. I know, Sabrina, I don't know if you want to give an actual response on that.
Yeah, I think that the intention is in advance of your August 30th work session, you would have additional sections. The sections that you have before you today are what we consider some of the shorter sections The other sections are very detailed. There's, almost 100 pages in some of them where there's this comment and response that needs to be thoroughly reviewed to make sure that the response is complete, so that staff can provide you with the confidence, that the consultant can provide you with confidence that it has been completely responded to. So I am hoping that we can give you the bulk of the document by your August 30th work session. That is the intention right now as we work towards that.
And if you're unable to, this is a sort of a living, breathing process, so
Correct.
these dates are movable.
They have to be. This is a lot of information. There's a set limitation of how many hours are in a day. I can tell you that we, between myself, council, several council, and the consultant team, we are spending as many hours, minutes of every day trying to get this together for you.
Okay, thanks.
Ed, did you have anything to share? No?
No. Were there any specific sections that the board had questions about?
I'll just speak solely for myself, again, not in terms of whether I support or don't support something, because that's not the objective here. But, I did think this is pretty thorough, and you can see from the substantive questions that are laid out in this document and the responses to the same. For the purposes of this proceeding, which is not coming to a vote right now or anything like that, I'm satisfied as it is now, but certainly Lisa and Lori and Lauren, who is actually, maybe we can bring, because Lauren's, Carrie, if you could bring the people who are on, Lauren on the screen, please.
It's just like the view settings, I think. So while we're doing that, I saw, especially in the natural resources section, there were a number of comments put forth by the planning board.
Just mention the page, just to make it easier.
I don't
Oh,
have
you
the
don't
page,
have
I
it.
mean, certainly on page 169 in the packet, which is comment D1 is the first one, and there's D2 and D3, et cetera. So, has the planning board reviewed these comments? No, is that a no?
No, the planning board.
Yeah.
Bonnie, do you want to answer?
I'm sorry,
I'll do it.
I was just getting a drink of water.
So right now, the first time these documents have been submitted to a board is your board as lead agency. So while the planning board submitted the comment letter, they, the information went into your packet. You have not accepted the document as complete. It is before you as lead agency to review the documentation in anticipation at a future meeting of determining the document complete. It has not done a circulation before any other board or committee in the town.
Okay, I want to make sure that they look at these sections because they have much more expertise than the town board does in these areas. So I want to make sure that they review these sections and we hear from them as to if they deem their questions have been answered and completed in a complete manner as well.
Typically, the sequence would be the lead agency would determine that the responses are accurate and adequate or complete. And then after the lead agency adopts the FGEIS, then notice goes out to all of the interested agencies that the document has been accepted as complete, and then they have an opportunity to provide written comments.
That seems, I understand what you're saying, that seems a little backwards to me. How am I supposed to know if something's complete if I don't have expertise in that area, but other people do? I'd like to hear from specifically, I understand if you're not referring it to the Westchester County Planning Board yet, but I certainly want to hear from our planning board and our zoning board and whoever else is answering, is whichever of our boards are asking these questions.
It's not typically how it's done, and I'm not sure that it would be something, I mean, there are certainly questions where we've been going to town staff, especially with respect to some of the technical information. But just in terms of whether a response is complete, that's really a lead agency determination to make. Kind of the idea there's one chef in the kitchen on that. Only the lead agency can determine whether or not the answer is complete.
And we can't rely on our own appointed boards to give us
You
information?
really shouldn't be in the position of deferring any of your responsibilities.
It's not deferring, it's asking questions. I mean, I guess the
don't think
onus
any-
is on us then to specifically ask the boards.
I mean, I don't think there's any reason why one could not make an inquiry, and nor is there a reason why they couldn't look at this. This is a public forum. No one's would want to exclude them, and we haven't excluded them. So if they care to share, nothing
It's a work
stopping them.
session, you don't like
from doing
people
so.
talking at work sessions, though.
Lisa, I'm talking in general. Nothing is preventing that. Is something preventing them? I mean, certainly they've gotten the packet or the opportunity to get the packet, just like anyone else in the public. Not a matter of whether you want to comment on a work session, because we're not voting on anything today. We're not voting on anything tomorrow or the next day. So there's ample time for them, should they want to make comments, and should you want to speak to them, and should I want to speak to them, to do so.
I will. I'm asking if, as a procedural question, if our boards that are appointed should be looking at this. I guess the answer is no, they should
Well,
not.
we're going to need a little direction then, if that's what the board would like us to do. As you saw from the example that Bonnie did, when a comment comes in, it gets broken out by subject. So, here we have comments. The first comment, as you pointed out, Lisa, is from the planning board chair, and it's in a section that we might not ordinarily think is, but that's a planning. So what we're going to have to do is send essentially every section to, you'll tell us what interest the agencies, just town agencies. So
Well, I mean, I know
board.
Sabrina does like a fabulous job, but if you are right now working with Bonnie to make sure that all the questions are answered appropriately before we see it, I would imagine that you would ask some of those boards as well, but I could be wrong.
So
It can be done, it's just not the way it's typically done.
Right.
It's not the
Okay.
process.
So this is not an exception to the, for lack of a better term, the rule. You certainly have the expertise and you're reviewing this. If I would tend to think if we sent out every question to see whether it's adequate or not, you're going to have some people say no matter what you say, it's not adequate. Some people are going to say absolutely adequate. So, absolutely anyone can opine and share their thoughts, and professionals can do so, those who are on volunteer boards. So I see no reason why this would be treated any different than any other process that involves an FGEIS and the secret process.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean every resident we were going to go
I
back
wasn't
to
either.
see if their question was appropriately answered, but I just thought our expertise on those boards might be helpful. But I will make sure that I ask them individually.
Lori?
So, you want my opinion on this question in particular? I do worry about it triggering a never-ending loop of an unresolving process. I don't, if we think that the planning board is the agency that we think has the most relevant input to have on some of this, then we could ask them if they're inclined to offer some comment within the bounds of our review process.
Exactly.
Like if they can do it in a timely fashion. They may
Exactly.
say no.
Typically, no. I mean, Sabrina's asking if the planning board or other interested agencies have a role in the step of the process.
Yeah, I don't understand why this is an exception
Why
to a rule.
shouldn't they?
Well, but here's something for you to think about, okay? Because I think, I hear the timing, I hear the desire to share. When the document is accepted as complete by your board, okay, and we're not talking about is the information answered the way you want it to be answered, but is all the information there to support a discussion, for lack of a better explanation. Once the document is accepted by you, which is required by the lead agency, there's at minimum a 30-day comment period. At that time, it is available to the public. It is submitted to interested agencies. It's published on the DEC's website. It is public knowledge. It may be appropriate, and I'm just throwing it out there, that maybe you want to have a joint meeting with the planning board, or have all of the chairs of the boards that you feel should have a say or review this and have a discussion with them. And then it's a discussion, it's a workshop with a board or the chairs of the boards to get their feelings on the completeness, for lack of a better word. I'm throwing it out there because I'm hearing what you're saying, but there's a time frame that seeker sets out for this, but really trying to get at what you're looking for. I think that, there's many boards and many individuals in the community that sit on boards that have experience regarding some of the topics. I'm not sure what you're looking for them to weigh in on in relation to an FEIS as opposed to the DGEIS, right? And so your board is taking the entire record, as Bonnie was explaining, and you're going to compile findings, right? And those findings are based on the environmental record, which includes the public comments as well as comments from the boards and the other interested agencies. So just thinking about the temporal timing as to when you may want to reach out to the boards or committees like you are to the public, that think about after you deem the document complete.
So Sabrina, since we have it, so then my question that I probably should have asked before we got into this part of it was, what happens with the comment that we get in that process? If this is finalized by us prior to it, what happens with that input that we get from our
Are you looking for a comment
agencies?
Are you looking for a comment that the question wasn't answered?
I think if we get feedback from one of our interested agencies that that something that was very important to them, right, that they offered in comment wasn't fully addressed, or the way that it was addressed didn't get to the.
There's a difference.
Okay.
Was it addressed?
Yeah.
Is different from the way it was addressed. That's the distinction that you're making through a completeness review versus a content review. Okay, and so as the lead agency, it's your responsibility to take the content of the entirety of the environmental review, right? Everything that has gone on up until the point that you accept the document complete, and establish your findings based on that. So, if the planning board, for example, feels that a question that they asked was not answered the way they wanted it to be asked, they can comment that they do not believe that the way it was responded to was what they wanted, or they felt it should be a different way. You will need to weigh that as you compile your findings.
So but the difference is, I agree with you, I understand the distinction you're making, but if somebody says, okay, it was addressed, but it wasn't addressed appropriately, there's not enough information here to make a decision, or the question was not answered appropriately. That's different from the question wasn't answered in the way I wanted it to come out. There's a difference. Somebody may say, look, I'm not 100% sure if the detail of subgrade and groundwater conditions, if this answered, to me, this doesn't feel like this was appropriately answered here, but maybe it is.
Well, let's
I'm not an expert on subgrade and groundwater conditions. So that's why I would like to say, this may not be answered with the answer that you want, but I want to know if it was answered appropriately and fulsomely. Whether or not the answer is what that person wants is not what we're looking for. The answer is, do we have all the facts that we need to make an appropriate decision?
Let's use an example, okay? We can use the depth to groundwater as an example. The form-based code, and Bonnie, please correct me if I am wrong. The form-based code was based on assumptions that we cannot dig down and create subsurface garages, right?
And that was based on the
It was based on borings that
Right,
were
the
done,
percentage
it was
of
based
borings.
on information from the infrastructure and streetscape program, okay? That was the basis for making that assumption.
Right.
The responses to comments regarding that, and the planning board wanted groundwater analysis conducted, right? We made assumptions to create the code based on information we had at hand. If an applicant came in proposing some, you make a findings based on the information, right? The assumption is there will be no subsurface garages. Okay? If an applicant came in proposing a subsurface garage, the applicant could not proceed without proving that they could have a subsurface garage, which would require that groundwater analysis, that depth analysis, the bedrock analysis. The board elected not to undertake the detailed analysis based on an existing information and documentation that it had, and you made an assumption that we've carried out. If somebody wants to do something that is different than what you assumed, they must demonstrate that it can be done, because it was not we went down a different path in analyzing it in that environmental review. Does that help?
Yes, I mean, my question was not specifically, I was just
No,
using
I
it
know,
because it's
I'm
the
just
first
trying
question.
to elaborate in examples.
Right, but so that's sort of, yeah, and making my point is that, is it appropriately answered? And in your situation you just gave, the answer might be yes, that we essentially kind of punted by making an assumption, and any developer who comes in, if they want to challenge that assumption, has to prove it. That I get, so the answer is, we didn't look at that, and so that's not gonna be included, and if anyone wants to come in, just like you said.
That's kind of how it plays out.
Right, that's fine.
And so the completeness question, is that question answered? Not whether or not, yes, we need to do the study,
Right, so
but
that,
this is what we
yes.
did. And so again, with the town team, legal, professional staff, and the consultant team reviewing this to ensure that the responses are complete for you as lead agency to make a determination as you determine. So Lisa, you may have conversations with people and you may feel it's not complete. That is something that you must discuss with your other board members, and you may not want to vote it to be complete.
Ed,
Can
does-
I make a suggestion? Rather than doing it on a wholesale basis where we're literally gonna have to send every chapter to whatever boards instruct us to, do it on a question by question or a response by response basis. So as you workshop these different sections, if you come to a particular response, and maybe it's on a kind of a tricky question, and you say, the board says to itself, you know, we really could use, I'm not sure about this response, I'm not sure if it's accurate, I'm not sure if it's complete. We'd like to get input on this particular response from a particular board. I think that might be a lot more efficient way of dealing with this, because we're literally gonna have hundreds, maybe over 1,000 pages of FGEIS when this is done. So to send all of those pages out to every interested town board is gonna be a big undertaking, a big ask in terms of what we're looking for them to do.
and there's got to be a reason why that's not typically done.
Well, because I think the word said it, because it will, has the potential to put you in.
In
endless-
perpetuity.
Sure.
Okay, I understand. And then can you, also you were saying there's a difference between declaring this complete and the finding statement, and the comments that we get in between those two steps, one informs the next, right? So the comments are not
They may.
meant,
If the comments on the FGEIS after it's accepted as complete will inform the finding
finding
statement. And the
statement.
finding statement is a much different document. The finding statement is more of that qualitative balancing and analysis.
Right.
Where those comments are really gonna be critical.
Right.
okay, and where the expert input
Absolutely.
on this analysis
Sure.
gets incorporated into how we define this area as a town.
Absolutely.
But, and then just for another point of clarification, once we declare it complete, then even if, let's say our planning board comes back and says, I don't think, now you're giving it to me, but you've already declared it complete, if they then have further questions, it's too late.
No, that's not what, well, I mean,
You
for
can
the,
always,
Well, I'm
look, you
asking
can always
that.
go back and change some, almost always go back. And certainly at that point in the process, you could go back. That's not, again, typically what we see. It's, when it's complete, it's complete. So it's a little hard to think of that scenario in the abstract. Could it happen? Sure. Could you deal with it? Yes.
so if there is a reference, let's say we're continuing to use the groundwater example, because it's a hot topic. If there was feedback from the planning board that the reference that was used to justify whatever groundwater decision is included should have included some other reference, and the planning board offers that reference to us, and we decide we want to incorporate it into the finding statement, then we are free to do that.
This is after the FGEIS is accepted as complete. Your finding statement, yes, you could have additional information or different analysis in the finding statement that comes in that way, yes.
But where's that analysis coming from?
Well, it's a little hard to do this in the abstract, so if there was just some, if it was some comment that had changed the way that you were looking at something with respect to a finding, then of course, then you could change or amend your finding to reflect that new factor information.
So the process is certainly going forward, not devoid of that expert input. And to send out wholesale every piece here out, every section out in its entirety, it would just be on in perpetuity, especially because you could get 2 people or 3 people on any board, the planning board, any experts who might agree or disagree. So at some point you have to accept something, one way or another, whether you accept it as I won't accept it, or you accept it for what it is.
Yeah, I'd suggest again that if you did it on a response by
Right.
response basis, it
And
would.
there's nothing
That makes
atypical
sense.
about this process here in Newcastle than any other FGIS that should be treated differently.
Certainly not, I think, having all the interested agencies, even just the town interested agencies, weighing in on every response.
I just remember when we've done them in the past, like for Chapel Crossing, for instance, we had a lot of agencies who were opining on that before it was deemed final. I guess my concern is not so much with stormwater, because whatever, it's stormwater. But let's just say, I don't know, there's a traffic analysis. And one, what's the right word? Like, they've used certain qualifications to determine some sort of traffic. And then we find out that that's not incorrect. They should have used some other qualification to determine that. How are we supposed to determine that?
We also have professional staff who's looking at it.
Yeah, the whole question
But our
like that,
professional staff, while as phenomenal as they are not experts on everything.
Nor is our planning board. They have expertise in certain areas.
No, that's why different people have expertise in different areas, exactly, and they've asked certain questions that they wanted qualified. So I would like to include, and I agree, giving everybody the 1,000 pages is probably not appropriate, but giving sections, especially ones where our boards have actually asked questions with regard to that section, that may be appropriate.
Well, I'm suggesting doing it on a response by response basis. So if there's a response to a particular question that you don't have confidence in, and you want to reach out to the planning board or the ARB,
Sure.
whatever the case may be, then yeah. And if there's a consensus for doing that on the
Okay.
board, this board, then by all means, and we can make that happen.
I think that's helpful, Ed, thank you.
Yeah.
I think to Ed's point, may I just chime in here? I think that even to Lisa's point as well about, stormwater, the hot topics of this legislation, we certainly want the answers about how just the economics of this all works out, going to 4 stories or capping at 3 stories, and then as well as the traffic issue. So I think that if we just hone in on the major issues of the document and address them with the resources and the people that are really good at this stuff, then I think that's really the critical way of getting it done, because I certainly want to make sure that, the traffic studies, the, economics of the stories on each building, et cetera, and parking, those are the key things that I'm personally focused on, and I want to make sure that those answers are complete and thorough. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
To you guys.
exactly.
Okay.
So I had a different question, if we can diverge from this topic, on this. So there were a number of examples in the responses where the response referenced the fact that, that the pending legislation is limited to the North Greeley corridor. So what I didn't understand about the inclusion of that is that my understanding is that the environmental impact statement applies to the whole study area and is meant to apply to the whole study area. So that qualifier, I don't understand how that impacts the application of the whole EIS, or does it limit the application of these findings to the North Greeley area in a way that was not intended?
I think the answer to that, and it would be helpful to look at a specific response, maybe for context, but let me just say that where I've seen it and where I think it is relevant is that to the extent that the form-based code is anticipated to have impacts, let's say a demand for additional services of some sort. The fact that the board will only be at best applying the form-based code to let's say 10% of the study area is necessarily going to, there's a 15-year build-out period assumed in the DGIS. If you're starting with 10% of the study area, it's necessarily going to stretch that build-out period because you're not doing the entire district at once. So that is, Bonnie and Sabrina will chime in here, and they probably would have more insight than I would, but conceptually, that's going to have a mitigating effect with respect to those impacts, because you're going to necessarily see a longer period of time to realize those effects.
So that becomes a variable
Well, it
in the
becomes,
study,
you know, the
because it
exercise
impacts
here.
time, because it has a measurable impact on time of execution.
Sure.
So that's the point. Okay, I just didn't want to document to create a situation where we had, we have talked about the utility of the full study area, right?
Right,
And that we
and-
can refer to it in the future if we want to employ a zoning change that's not form-based code, because we have, with perhaps an amended EIS for a particular example. So if we want to consider the future and our investment in this process, the substantial financial and time investment that the community has made in this process to have value beyond this particular zoning change in mind, then we want to make sure the document is sufficient to do that.
Correct. You are 100% correct. And so the reference to the limited area that this board is considering to regulate, that is used to combat a comment, as Ed exemplified, 15-year build-out. We believe is going to happen a lot sooner. Okay? Well, it's a 15-year build-out based on the situations of combination of lots, processes to make sure that you have designs that are consistent with the code, so on and so forth. It's a lot of time that has to have that happen, and then to have the whole area, we're estimating 15 years. The fact that the town-owned land has been taken out, the fact that you have limited the area for implementation of the code, that is stretching that full build-out that's being studied beyond 15 years, right? And so wherever you see a reference to that code, it is a, and by the way, because
Okay.
the town board is only doing 10% of the entire study area, the impact that you're questioning is going to be less at this time.
Okay.
Sabrina.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Aren't we studying the entire 72 acres right now?
Yes.
Can't the next town board come in and apply this to the entire 72 acres? Yes.
Yeah, they could.
Yes, they can. So that's a very misleading comment, because the, the point is, the next town board could come in, apply this to all 72 acres. The point of the form-based code is to expedite development, which means that it won't be expedited. Someone could conceivably come in, if this was applied to the whole form-based code, and without dividing lot lines, developing their individual lots right now, could develop everything right away. So to say that without making faces is a little misleading, because what the finding statement is going to approve is not North Greeley, it's this entire study area.
The finding statement is going, so what, and I don't think Bonnie really hit on this in her presentation. The FEIS establishes thresholds regarding how far you can go without seeing an environmental impact. The environmental impact statement is establishing those thresholds. So right now we have 15, the comment was about the 15 years. That's not a real focus, right? It really gets into a lot of construction happening, being very disruptive. You are establishing thresholds. This board has discussed the timing thresholds. You have limited to a certain area. That is a move to try and reduce everybody coming in all at once. Without the combination of lots, it is impossible for certain lots of a certain size, the majority of the lots, to take full advantage of the draft form-based code you are proposing, because you have legislative or proposed legislative requirements they cannot meet because of the size of their lots. Okay?
Well, that's
So
only
not
if they
every
combine
land-
more than a half an acre.
Excuse me?
I thought it's only if they combine more than a half an acre.
No. Listen, we're talking two different
Right,
things.
that was for.
Okay, the statement that you said is that if another board can come in and apply this code everywhere, and then everybody can just build up. The maximum build out analysis was based on a combination of lots that enabled an understanding of environmental impacts, right? We don't have that crystal ball. We don't know how lots are going to be formed, but lots need to be combined in order to develop. The lots in the hamlet, the majority of which are less than 1/10 of an acre. Okay, there's not, because of the stormwater requirements and the parking requirements, the ADA requirements, it may be virtually impossible for them to develop any further than what exists there today.
I don't think that's true, but, okay, reasonable minds can differ. I just think that I saw the same things that Lori did in reading this, at a few places it said, oh, but the current form-based code is only applying to North Greeley, so we're basically not gonna answer this question. To me, that's
not what it
not,
said.
that's how I read it. So to me, some of these questions were not, I would like to see it applied to the entire study area and not just North Greeley, because this may be applied to the entire study area. A form-based code could be applied. That's the problem with studying all 72 acres, is that it's not just North Greeley, it's the entire 72 acres. So I will go back and highlight them, but I did notice that as I was reading it too, that it did make that qualification in a number of places.
I think if I could just add one more thing, the responses are designed to respond to the same build out that was described in the DGEIS in terms of the entire study area. And it then also, because the direction had changed, also describes the fact and compares the impact of just the smaller North Greeley area. However, it's not meant to be a replacement, and it's not meant to be, the idea that the entire study area was covered is in order to have that information, as someone said earlier, that the town has invested in all of this potential impact analysis. And for instance, talking about the thresholds again, just giving an example of, say, traffic. Say that the full build out with all of the potential assumptions come true, and after the 12th year, you have, out of 900 units, when you get to the point of the thresholds are going to identify XYZ traffic improvements need to be installed if you have the full build out. But what it's going to do is work backwards to, if you have only 50 units, you don't need it. If you have 150, you don't need it. If you have 300, it's not until you get to, say, 600 units that you would need to implement that mitigation. And therefore, if the lots are never combined that would need to be combined, or the town-owned land is never developed because of that's not what the public and the town board is interested in. If, there's a lot of all these ifs. So the thresholds will help define and inform the findings that you put out there. So in addition to the likelihood of something happening, the thresholds will help, I think, the board understand how much development is could occur, would be likely to occur, and you're kind of controlling it in that way. In addition to what Sabrina said about certain lots, just if they're not combined, are never going to be able to be developed with the new standards. So I don't know if that helps, but
Provide some clarity, but thank you.
One additional point of clarification, so I just want, and maybe we should take it out of, make it just generically. If anytime the board wants to adopt a zoning ordinance, a couple things have to happen. You have to have the legislation itself, and then it has to be mapped. So here, if the board did adopt the form-based code, there's a second step, it has to be mapped. And what the board's considering now is mapping it just on the North Greeley portion of the study area. If a future board ever wanted to expand that area and map an additional district as a form-based district, it's going to require a public hearing and additional legislation. It can't just happen.
But technically, it only requires one public hearing.
It requires it's only ever a public hearing. Oftentimes it happens over multiple nights.
Right,
But
but
it's a public hearing.
it could be one, and the environmental review would already have been done. So it could be done pretty quickly, assuming the legislation can be drafted quickly. And if it's a form-based code, it's probably the same, very similar to the current code. It would be easy to expand that.
I want to speculate about what that might look like. I'm not sure I would agree with easy, but it just.
Not difficult.
The only point is, the only point I'm trying to make is there's another process involved.
Mhm.
So are there any, I did hear a concern about some phraseology in terms of the North Greeley. Are there any specific responses, or we can, this is the time to highlight them. Or you can, if the board wants to come back to us, this is very much a work in progress.
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay, that'll work.
For my part, it was more of a concern about the response to comments and the incorporation of that qualifier throughout the proposed FGEIS, and whether that would create limitations to use of the environmental impact statement in the future.
We could drop that.
We'll be mindful of that, but I think the purpose of addressing it was to highlight one of probably what's going to be multiple mitigation methods. Another would be when the board decided that 5-story structures were not going to be permitted, right? That's by way of mitigation. So that's I believe the purpose of referencing it, but we'll be mindful as we go through additional drafts.
So look specifically, one of the most glaring examples of that was comment D13. where the comment was, the proposed form-based code implies the intentional destruction of 70-plus acres of town land and trees, so massive apartment buildings, stores and garages can be built. And then this just said it was intended to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan, and the proposed area to be rezoned is limited to North Greeley, so that's not gonna happen. So, to me, that's not answering, I mean,
So,
I don't
but
know
no,
how you answer the question exactly, but that's one of the examples where it should be answering the question for the full study area and not just say, well, now the form-based code is only being applied to one block, so it doesn't.
Right, but if I understand that response, the sentence prior to that says, with the maximum build-out scenario, it's estimated 2.7 acres of impervious surface would be added, right, which is, I would agree, different than destroying 70 acres of forest. Which is an increase of 4% over a period of 15 years. And then as Sabrina was just pointing out, that qualifier about how the legislation is just intended to be applied to North Greeley area is another element that would add some breaks to the process. Is that
Correct.
appropriate? Thank you.
Potentially, though, there's no way to know that, that's the problem.
It's information, though. Right?
It's
And that's what this is.
information, yes.
This whole exercise is information.
Right, but my concern is by putting those qualifiers in there, there's no way of knowing. So maybe it is only gonna ever apply to North Greeley, assuming it's adopted, but maybe it's not. Maybe in January, a new town board comes in and says, we like it, we're gonna apply it to all 72 acres. There's no way to know what that timing is. So
Right,
I
but
think the
this exercise-
answers need to
Let-
be.
This
But-
exercise is the intellectual exercise of
Right, I
taking the
wasn't
information that's
finished
currently
speaking.
available and sharing it.
So okay, if I could finish, what I was gonna say is, so the study area the study and the responses have to apply to the whole 72 acres. That's the only way to get enough information to know if we can deem this complete. We can't deem it complete if it's not talking about the entire study area. And then to adopt a finding statement, with regard to this, to me, the finding statement is being based on this FGEIS, which is supposed to apply to the whole 72
But-
acres, and where there's no way to know how much of this in the future will be implemented.
So I
But
think,
it is.
I agree with that, right? That was what I brought up earlier, was some concern that the language around referring to the limitation and scope in this document, let's make sure it's not problematic, doesn't create a false information set that's used to answer these questions. Because it is intended to apply to the whole area. The example that you cite absolutely answered the question based on the whole study area.
Okay.
Right, and to clarify, Sabrina, because I think if it's a phraseology issue, Ed, you could make sure that's clear.
We can fix it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not
Yeah.
ignoring the 72 acres, and I think we're getting distracted from that, and it's becoming sort of a reality that it isn't. So it is explained, it is addressing the 72 acres, and explain that.
Yes, the FEIS addresses the entire 72 acre study area. The point that you're making about concern about referencing the area that you as a town board wish to rezone is something that we can ensure is phrased appropriately and not replacing the addressing of the entire study area.
Perfect.
The example that was used was a response to the entire study area with a further qualifier referencing your action that you wish to make. We will make sure that the rest of the document and the references regarding that are adequate in relation to this discussion. No
But
problem.
the important thing
Thank
is the information is still there, it's accurate, it's the way it's being potentially viewed in terms of
Correct.
word usage, but it's being done, it is there, and it's being provided.
Correct. We're gonna go back and we're gonna
There, you
make
should
sure
read-
that it's adequately phrased, yes.
Thank you.
And just so you know, that is how we try to answer all the questions, address the entire study area, and then usually if it applied, we would reference the North Greeley, but it's not that way in every case. But that was the way that, we were directed, that the action still has not changed in terms of the study area and the DGEIS and the FGEIS, so they could be used potentially in the future. The answers would be very different if it really was only addressing the North Greeley area on everything.
Thank you.
Additional feedback, questions, comments?
Lori, Lisa?
No, I have, I've churned through it about twice so far from, and it's gonna probably take another time or two to really, but my first impressions are certainly that the answers are comprehensive. They seem to address the question that was asked. To Lisa's point, I don't know that I have the professional expertise to assess their appropriateness or,
Right.
comprehensiveness. But I believe I understand the exercise.
So, okay, one other quick question. On comment, I think I'm in the culture section now. I don't know, D12, for instance. The question is, I'm concerned about the environment, climate change, and carbon emissions, increased carbon emissions from this full development. And the answer is, comments noted.
Well, it's more
So,
than
you
that.
know,
It's
I
more
know
than
I'm
that.
not
That-
done,
okay,
but
good.
then it says one of the objectives is to reduce car travel, but we don't know if that's actually gonna happen. Most people who live here will have a car. So then it talks about some green spaces that won't be touched. But it's not answering, well, how are the carbon emissions, assuming a full build-out, going to impact the town? I didn't see an answer to those questions. I just saw comments noted.
No, well, then it says, refers you to D4 and D5, so there's other, and then it refers you to
I didn't
the
see
traffic.
the answer. I read all those.
And it refers you, what, hold on, this was.
I
12, you
read
said?
that. So, and that's in a couple of places. I feel like I just want to look through it and make sure, to the extent we can actually give specific information, we should, and that should be answered. Those are actually legitimate concerns, so I want to make sure those are answered.
And again, I think they were D4, D5, and then it relates to responses in Chapter 2F for traffic, but
Right, I didn't see 2F yet, obviously.
also, as we've all noted, this is an ongoing process, so we're not resolving anything tonight. We're
No,
not
that's why I'm
deciding anything
making
tonight.
comments, just like I'm supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And I looked at D4, which is talking about the tree permit removal, and D5, which is talking about certain other resources with trees. Nothing's talking about the increase in carbon emissions. Nothing was talking about some of the issues there with car traffic there. Well, I haven't read the traffic one yet, but, so those are things I want to make sure that they're answered.
Anything further?
Nope.
No, I'm good right now.
All right.
Certainly a reference to something that we don't have tonight would be difficult for us to assess tonight.
100%.
exactly.
That's why we're not resolving it tonight.
No, but we're
Um,
supposed to ask the questions, so.
No
that's-
one is saying you shouldn't ask the question. That's glad you asked the question. Ed, so in terms of moving forward for this process, what's the next step? We're just gonna have August 30th as our planned date, and whatever we have done by then, we're going to review.
More sections, similar discussion on the 30th, yeah.
Okay. Lauren, did you have any questions?
And the 30th, just for everyone, that's a Monday, not a Tuesday, right? So people should just note that.
All right, bear with me. And Sabrina, if you could stay, because I'm sure there'll be questions, thank you. Okay, so the next issue we're dealing with is authorization to adopt basketball court rental fees.
Right,
Go
so
ahead, Jo.
our new basketball court has become very popular, as we knew it would be, used, all the time. And people have actually asked about renting the fee for, or renting the court for a, birthday parties and things like that. So the rec commission was suggesting a rental fee of $300 for residents, $450 for non-residents. The rentals would be in 2-hour blocks, and they were contemplating doing it on Sunday afternoons. Okay?
So, but people will have to obviously apply through the rec department.
Right, sure, yes.
Like
Of course,
any
the
other-
way
like
they would
the-
any other
Yeah,
facility.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay.
So this is just approval of a fee and an amendment to our master fee schedule.
And
So-
ultimately, we could limit if it becomes used too much and.
Yeah,
residents
that's
don't-
what I'm concerned with, because people, as you said, love our basketball court, and some people can only play on the weekends.
Right.
So I definitely want to make it available for rental at birthday parties, because I think that's awesome. But we want to make sure that that's monitored, and if it's taking away from all our residents being able to use it, we want to make sure that they monitor that.
Well, are they, sorry, what do you mean by monitor? Do you mean like limit it to a particular?
Yeah, like if it's
available
being
time,
used
which
too
is
much,
what you
and,
suggest?
yes.
Yeah, certain hours, I think they were doing it 1 to 3, 3 to 5, so that it would still be available for Sunday nights, the courts are lit, and early in the morning.
Okay, so what they're drafting is like two-hour.
2-hour
windows
slots,
on
and they'll see how
Sunday
it goes.
afternoons.
Right. Okay, great.
But
All
it's
right.
not just for Sunday also. What if someone wants a Thursday night birthday party?
At this point, it was only going to be for Sundays, I believe.
Is it like, is it a pilot?
Yeah, it was a pilot program, yeah.
Okay.
Just to start on Sundays. They run quite a few programs after school and things like
Yeah.
that. They want the kids to be able to use it. And I have to tell you, it
It's
is used.
constantly
I know, it's
constantly
great.
used.
So they want
I mean, we come in first thing in the morning, people are already on the court. Yeah, and you'll see when you leave tonight, I'm sure people will be there.
All right, Jill, authorization to charge filing fee for adult ceramics classes.
Firing fee.
Firing.
Firing fee. It's for the kiln, and it's 4 cents per cubic inch, and it's actually very competitive in comparison to other art classes.
I trust you.
All right, thanks.
So sorry, just so that I understand, this is like,
For pottery,
okay, so this is, you're enrolled in a class.
Yes.
And this is an additional fee.
fee, right, for using the kiln and the fire.
It's not like bring your clay to.
No.
Just do it.
Okay. My kids might love that though.
All good.
All right, consideration of deeming the 2013-14 outstanding parking tickets as uncollectible. And can you just explain, we discussed this, if you could explain sort of how we got here and what's
Right,
this about?
so, I want to say 2018, in response to a actual note by our auditor, we had outstanding parking tickets that were uncollectible, that had been sitting on our books since, I want to say 2003.
In excess of 6 years.
Yeah, in excess of 6 years. 6 years is a key number when it comes to retention records within the state. 6 years is the rule of thumb for retaining records, most records in the state. So our auditor noted that we had tickets, uncollectible tickets on our books for years and years. And he suggested that what we should be doing is deeming them uncollectible, writing them off, and then making a true effort for those more recent years to try to collect them. And so that's what we've been doing very religiously.
And one of the issues we have, if I'm not mistaken, we can't suspend someone's license, such as if it was on a state highway for failing to pay. And we can enforce collections for a resident by not giving them, for example, a parking permit or reissuing something else. But if you're a visitor or you've moved away, that's really the big bulk of this, that's the issue.
That's exactly what it is, exactly right. So you've got people from out of town, come down the state, use our train station, get tickets every day, leave, or else people have left. Another good trick used to be people would just turn in their plates. Get a new set of plates every 2 years when they got a new car, and then just leave all the old plates on, old tickets on there.
So now you're all learning how to
Now you're
avoid
learning
your
how to-
tickets,
Yes,
by the way. Didn't we talk,
Anyway.
Jill, I forget, we talked about this like years ago too. Wasn't there a program, because I know some of the other towns use it, where you can work with motor vehicles and you actually can't renew your registration, or your license if you have unpaid parking
It's
tickets,
registration, it's not
as long
ours,
as it's in the
it's
state
not
of New
local.
York.
Yeah, it's not.
We did
It's my
explore that.
understanding that it's not local. It was, there are certain tickets that can be, certain cities had it, but we don't have it. That's not part It's not.
But we had
within our
looked into it, I remember, I forget what happened.
ability. Yeah, we're not eligible for it.
We also discussed, for example, working with other municipalities, like if we had Armonk people, North Castle
Yeah.
people, it
Yeah,
just
like we
didn't.
do for
Yeah.
water rents, it didn't work, we tried doing it through collection agencies.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's, what we're asking the board for is a total write-off of 23,520 tickets for tickets that have been outstanding since 2013 and 2014.
Got it.
Is that $23,000 or 23,000 tickets?
No, $23,000.
Okay, you said tickets.
That
Oh,
would-
sorry.
that would be
Like, wow, we read a
phenomenal.
lot of tickets.
No, that's a lot of tickets, I apologize. Yeah.
Joe, I'll just note too, this money's not recorded on our books anywhere. These are parking tickets that are recorded with the Justice Court. The money's not a receivable on our books. Basically, they're just removing these people from the system in the Justice Court. It's not like we lost anything, we're not writing this off against anything, we're just removing it from the system. So it has no financial effect on us, other than we're not going to be able to collect the 23, but we probably weren't going to be able to anyways.
We weren't collecting. And the last thing I wanted to talk to the board about was granting an amnesty period for parking scofflaws. So according to our law, you're a scofflaw if you have 3 unpaid parking tickets. Well, what happened over the course of COVID is, let's say from March of 2020 through this March, what Justice Court had traditionally done when you had an outstanding ticket is they would send you reminder letters. And if the board recalls, I want to say 2 years ago, we changed our parking fee structure so that our parking tickets doubled and then tripled to try to encourage people to pay promptly. So as a result, people that were sitting on these tickets when they got, like right before COVID, those tickets have now tripled. And we did not send out reminder letters because court shut down. So, you know, I'm sure it was the last thing on anybody's mind when, you know, the country just went into lockdown that I had an outstanding parking ticket. What we'd like to do is we'd like to be able to send out letters to those scofflaws who have 3 tickets between March of 2020 and March of 2021. Offer them the opportunity to pay the original fines on those tickets. Let's give them a grace period of 2 months, let's say. So from August 30th, when this resolution would be approved by the board, through October 29th, which is the last Friday in October, to take and come into court and just, you know, send us in the original base prices of the tickets. You know, the tickets were still valid unless you had an issue with the ticket, but this way at least we are recouping some of our money and we're not imposing that double and triple, you know, fine payment that has since incurred.
Can I ask you a question? Why do we send out reminders? That seems like a huge waste of manpower.
Because we get money back from it. Because if you can send out a couple of letters and you end up with a $150 check for a parking ticket, it's worth it for us to, you know, to send it out. They're reminder letters. We have it. It comes out of a computer program, and we do it on a regular basis. And we actually end up collecting quite a bit of money from it. So it's actually a money maker for us. Otherwise, we didn't bother. But especially
Yeah, because
with
I've
tickets-
gotten tickets in other towns pretty close to here where my ticket has doubled and I did not get a reminder.
I bet you didn't, but you know what?
And I paid it, just saying.
I
When I found it in my car. So because if we're not letting people renew permits because they have the tickets or doing anything else, you would think at some point
You know
we'd
what,
make
the-
more money.
The board has always been very gracious with our residents. I mean, think about it. You know, there is always a parking permit required in our commuter parking lot, right? People forgot, they parked there, they didn't realize they had to renew, they got a ticket. We said to them, you know what, you pay the ticket within 7 days, you apply for a new permit, we waive the ticket. We've always extended these courtesies to our board, you know, to our residents. So it's entirely your call.
I have no objection to being courteous and sending out a letter.
Nice courtesy.
I mean, as long as they don't, the court department doesn't mind doing
No, this
those.
was actually their suggestion.
Okay, great.
I embrace that philosophy.
Lauren,
Administrative
any
items?
thoughts on it? You okay with it? Oh, great. Okay. The next items are there is one more thing I just want to mention to you. We have received a film permit for this 3 Barns Road. And we don't usually talk about them in, well, we do actually talk about them in work sessions. But anyway, they're sort of in a bit of a crunch. They had come to us not quite understanding that certain things about our town, but make a long story short, there are 3 days that they're planning on filming. The issue is that the filming times are outside of our regular operating hours, let's put it that way. So it's a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. It's during the week. The first day is 7 to 7, which is fine. It's clearly within our, our noise permit would allow for that. The other one is 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. And the last one is 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. And the board has been very flexible in the past about nighttime filming hours, but we have also heard from neighbors that it is quite intrusive. And so with that sensitivity in mind, I was going to ask the board if they may consider if the film company can get letters of no objection from the neighbors, that they're okay with the filming until 11 p.m. or 1 a.m., that we would grant that waiver. And when I asked them why do they need the nighttime hours, it's because they're filming a romantic thing and they need it nighttime. So it gets dark late now, which is why they need the late hours. But 1 o'clock in the morning is, let's face it, filming is loud.
Yeah.
Generators are loud, crews are talking, they're loud, they don't realize that they're loud. They look around, they don't see anybody, they think noise doesn't carry. They're like, oh, it's not like in the city, there's nobody around here. And I'm like, that means that it literally sounds like, you're talking in somebody's ear right next door, the next property over.
Certainly, if they don't object, neighbors don't object,
I
I have no objection.
There's a pond there,
Yes.
so can we ask that they make sure they get that, no objection from the folks across from the pond, which might not be considered like an adjacent neighbor?
I have to take a look at the property there. I don't know who the adjacent neighbor is there. Is that 23?
So there's, I don't know across the pond who it is.
Okay.
7 and 9 are right next door, which could be impacted, but it just, when you were talking about sound traveling and how it travels so much more over water,
Oh, we learned that.
that,
Yes, we did.
that perhaps the neighbors, if there are neighbors on the other
Yeah,
side of that pond,
I think it actually abuts 20. I'll take a look at it now.
okay.
But,
And remind me, what did we require for the filming that was on Heats Cross that was after hours?
that we required no objection, the neighbors to see.
You did?
They were okay with it, yeah. They did. And some of them really regretted that.
Yeah, I remember a couple saying they were not fond of it, but they weren't going to, they didn't want to stop it or something.
That they would go for it. And, the film company's very nice, and I have to tell you, I really appreciate the fact that they were trying to be very transparent with them, but I told them that, the nighttime is really a hard sell for us. And especially the 1 a.m. I appreciate the fact that with the hours and the crews and unions, there's certain times that they have to do a 12-hour, whatever.
Yeah, they're 12-hour shift.
Yeah, and it's not like they can do the nighttime stuff earlier. I don't know what to tell them, but they're going to have to try to work with the neighbors and see what they can do about it.
And you might want to let them know, similar to what the other group did, that for neighbors they were severely impacting late at night, they sort of volunteered to put them up in a hotel, things like that, just.
I will mention it.
Yeah.
This is a much smaller production than the other one was, so I don't know what their budget is, but. The county is doing a very big push for movies in Westchester, and so I it's very nice of them. They're including Newcastle in it, but our residents are not really so excited. Some residents, the residents that are renting their properties are very excited about it. The residents that are surrounding it, not so much. Yeah, it's a new position. Anyway, so I will talk to them to see what they can do. If they can get us those letters of no objection, then we're good to go on it. Okay, great. Thank you. The next things are administrative items. So payment of claims, adoption of monthly report for July. We've got a cash bond agreement from 10 Cynthia Court. We have an authorization to settle from 2015 to 2020 tax certiorari proceedings, which is a refund of $1,600 and change. We have a resolution in support of the town of Newcastle's New York State Energy Development Clean Energy Communities Points-based grant. Sabrina, this is a $10,000
It's a $10,000 grant, yes.
for the town, so very excited about that. The authorization to purchase water meters for our water unit at DPW. Authorization for our final payment and retainage release for D&M Electric Contracting Company. This is the company that refurbished the electrical service at the Inningwood Pump Station. And that's in the amount of $111,144.53. We've got an authorization to award the RFP for engineering services for our Fort Bedford Tunnels Pump Station that needs to be completely refurbished, and that's in the amount not to exceed $167,931. And last but not least, an authorization to renew our contract with Logically, which is formerly Sullivan Data Management, for $96,720, and that's to, it expires in March of '22. So we're in the middle of the contract, we're just trying to, they were actually gonna wait till January, but we'd like to pay them, we don't have a contract with them, so.
And we're happy with them?
We're very happy with them.
All right, so we can move to adjourn and take a brief moment.
Question though, if we wanted to open discussion on the mask thing, do we do that here? So that there's comments in the next meeting?
We can do that then, we can do that, or we can consider that
Okay.
for next meeting.
Well, I think we want to get some comment in the next
Okay, that's
meeting, so
fine.
we should open the topic now, right? We don't necessarily need to spend time discussing it tonight, but just that we want to. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think that what we're looking for is to open some conversation with the community about the return of a mask mandate for indoor spaces in Newcastle. A few points that are leading me to open this discussion. One, that the Delta variant of COVID has become the major COVID strain present in Westchester and elsewhere. It's believed that the Delta variant is more successful at infection than previous strains, requiring less time of exposure, infecting more individuals from each single carrier. That vaccinated individuals can test positive for COVID, can exhibit symptoms of COVID, and most importantly, can infect others. Vaccination does reduce the likelihood of these, and most definitely reduces the mortality and morbidity associated with severe COVID. Approximately 20 to 25% of the local eligible population is not yet vaccinated, and children under 12 will not be eligible for vaccination until the winter. The percent vaccinated may actually be an overestimate as it is based on outdated census data. New hospital admissions for COVID in Westchester County have begun to increase locally, as well as an uptick in ICU admissions. This information is available on the CDC website and other sources that I can provide if needed. So the emergence of the Delta variant, coupled with the abandonment of social distance and masking, have together set the stage for a new wave of COVID that should be concerning to us all. For these reasons, I would like to open a discussion for the return of a Newcastle mask ordinance, perhaps with some modifications, in order to meet this new challenge. I am proposing that we require masks in indoor, commercial, and public spaces in Newcastle, regardless of vaccination status, with special considerations, perhaps for dining establishments and perhaps exercise facilities to be defined and with input from the community and our business owners. So I am hoping that in our next town board meeting, we can get some input from the community on this. I'm also hoping that between now and then we get some input from the county or some guidance from the county. And we may also at that point have a feeling for the direction that our schools are taking on this issue as well. That could help inform our community's direction for this.
I support a movement towards that direction, certainly not what we had before with the outdoor requirement for masks and necessarily on private property, but I certainly see what's happening, and when you look at the numbers weekly through the county, and you even see those statistics in terms of who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated, if my recollection serves me right, which I'm pretty certain it is, it's one vaccination shot, not everyone is double, so a little deceiving in terms of those numbers too. So I think it's a smart thing to do, start considering it, because it's more not if but when things start to get worse. We're not in a bubble, but we don't want to bring something to the vulnerable people, especially children. So I do support that. conversation and figure out a way to make it work.
Yep, I always support conversations and seeking input, so I have no problem with that. As you know, we said earlier, I think the county has now required masks indoors in government buildings, so I'm more inclined to, push for that right now, but of course, by the time August 30th comes around, we may have more guidance to consider. But while I love that we are on the forefront of many environmental and other initiatives, I'm not 100% sure I want to be on the forefront of this initiative. But I recognize that it is obviously very important, and we want to stop COVID as much as we can. So open to definitely discussions.
We don't have to take
And
any,
they don't have to be in person too. You guys, the public can write to us as well.
we don't have to take any formal steps to open some sort of public hearing. It's just going to add it to the agenda for discussion.
For a workshop
Okay.
discussion, sure,
Okay.
that's what we need to do.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? So could we otherwise adjourn the work session?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-minute break? All right, thanks.
Bye.
We're 45 minutes late. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the not 8:30 but 9:17 August 10th Town Board meeting of the Town of Newcastle. If I can get a motion to commence the meeting.
Move to open the meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Jill, any announcements you'd like to share?
No, I'm gonna save it for tomorrow's meeting.
As will I in my supervisor's report. And so no town administrator report either?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is where you have an opportunity to call in, email in, whatever it may be, or people here in the public for public comment, new business. If you just please indicate who you are and your residency.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Ehrlich. I am a resident of town, One Apple Tree Close, and a couple of things. This is all super positive. First off, my first note is for the Welcome Back Summer Party. There is a wonderful group called the Chappaqua Millwood Chamber of Commerce, and tomorrow night they've elected to get back together again, August 11th, from 7 to 9 p.m. That would encourage folks to certainly consider membership joining, but if not, come as a guest, and we'll bring you in. We help out. It is a good deal of fun, and then that will be at the Birchwood Swim and Tennis Club, 681 Quaker Road in Chappaqua. But you should need to go online and RSVP, and please come. If you're not a member, it's a paltry $12 fee. The second thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention, because it's enormously important, over this summer, Keenan Bean did an extraordinary job in outlining the issues relating the upcoming marijuana laws and how it will affect the town. And I wanted just to call attention to this remarkable job that they did, and I would call on the town to add it to the agenda, just simply to discuss it and also make everybody aware of some of the decisions, such as any upcoming referendum and things that folks are doing. But let's be positive. This town board has done a terrific job in dealing with these issues that go beyond the province of the town borders, and a New York State application and how it affects this town. So kudos to you all. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next person, I want to come up.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Excellent. Okay, Scott Levine, 149 King Street. Forgive me, my notes are a little bit telegraphic. I was taking them as you were talking earlier. I'm concerned by what Lori talked about earlier about the idea of protecting the investment in the GEIS analysis. That's one way to look at it. From my perspective, I would consider that it's been wasteful because it's built on a foundation of sand, because ultimately it doesn't reflect community vision. As we've heard, there has been no charrette, et cetera, et cetera. I've got some specific concerns about the risk of developer litigation. So this would be developers outside of the 6, or latest number I've seen was 7.7 acres of the North Greeley area. So developers who own property or have interest outside of that area, suing the town or pressuring the town, et cetera, for either variances or forced, coerced rezonings for that area outside of the North Greeley corridor, and basically that happening immediately, the January 1st issue that Lisa mentioned earlier. I think there's a common misconception among the public that North Greeley right now is all that's on the table, and I think you put it very eloquently, it's not all that's on the table. So I guess it's a question really for the attorney. We've heard Jennifer Gray, who's your colleague in for the planning board, she accepted that developers can and may point at a completed FGEIS, a completed finding statement for the entire 72 acres in support of variances, in support of rezoning. Do we feel, does that expose us to risk, us as a community, these areas outside of the North Greeley corridor?
We've counseled the town board on this. It's not our practice to have those discussions in a public setting, obviously. I think about the most I can say, absent further direction from the town board, is that we're confident that the adoption of a finding statement based on the entire study area is not going to expose the town to the type of risk that you're describing, where a property owner would have some sort of fast track to a use variance, that's what we're talking about, or a zone change, just by virtue
It could also
of,
be an area variance.
just by virtue, area variance would be different. I think what you're getting at is a use variance, right? Because
Well, no,
I
area
don't actually
refers
know,
to
but
definitions.
the point is that what the adoption of a finding statement on the study area, again, it's our opinion, is not going to expose the town to undue risk.
Okay, thank you. So earlier this year, Keenan Bean prepared a memo about the town's, it might have been last year, about the town's alleged inability to survey residents about the form-based code. That was published as a memo. It's on the town's website now. Earlier this year, Keenan Bean prepared a memo about the town's option for replacing the town supervisor. That was published and placed on the town's website. So I guess it's really a request for the town board. We've just heard that this opinion exists. Would you please publish a similar sort of memo so that we can see what the analysis is? It's super important. I just want to say for all the board members, these documents, this FGEIS that's upcoming, this finding statement, these are real documents with real serious real-world consequences. It's not simply an intellectual exercise. And let me just close pointing to one case study several years ago in Pelham Manor to the south of us. They went through the entire process to consider a rezoning, a DGIS process. And ultimately, they decided not to accept the DGIS, not to proceed. And if you're not serious about doing all 72 acres, it's something I'd encourage you to think about. Thank you very much.
Hi, Roger Clipper, 18 Pond Hill Road in Chappaqua. Seemed like an appropriate thing to follow with. I think I'm going to start with, to some extent, what Scott just said. I think I'll start with what I think the right answer is here. I think the right answer is you've engaged the town, you've gone through a process, and the result of that process was, for whatever reason, for reasons contained in the EIS or reasons that maybe one would consider, capricious, just not, whatever our reasons are, we're moving ahead with, 6 acres on North Greeley. Like, that was the decision collectively that we came to. The right answer is to have a finding statement that corresponds to what you plan to do. This seems like in some ways an epiphany, and yet in some ways it's the obvious answer. Like, just match what you're filing to what you plan to do. Because, at this is the point where you get to be capricious. You can say, for whatever reason, we don't want to have all 72 acres developed. We can do that. The problem is once you file a finding statement, you don't, I'd be very interested in the legal analysis, but I think, there are certain limitations in terms of what you can say no to, right? And I think there was some discussion, I guess a week and a half ago, in terms of and I'll just read it because this is from the secret site, what a finding statement actually is. It's a positive finding statement means that the project or action is approvable. I think I said that last time and someone said no, that's not what it is, but this is from the New York State DEC site. after consideration of all the final EIS and demonstrates that the action chosen is the one that avoids or minimizes adverse environmental impacts. So, when you have a finding statement, that is what you're saying, that is what you're putting on file. And then, and I'd be very, very concerned to what extent it constrains you or exposes you to litigation down the road. But, so that's one, I consider a big reason not to do that. But the other one, it sort of goes to what some of the earlier conversation tonight. You talked about, deferring to, be it the planning board or other boards that have the sufficient expertise on all these various items. And it was mentioned that, this could end up in an endless loop. Well, I think that's telling you something. That's telling you that if you apply, the answer is not to just limit it. And with all due respect, you don't have the sufficient expertise to opine on these issues. And you've just scratched the surface at this point. You've got so much stuff coming. And you will not have the expertise to say, oh, yes, that is acceptable. That is okay. And the answer to that is not to just cut it short, to just put blinders on and say, okay, because the alternative is some endless loop that could take 5 years. Well, yes, that's what that's saying is to do a form-based code for 72 acres. Yeah, maybe that could take 5 years. And that's telling you that is not the right thing. Or maybe it's not the right thing. In fact, the community's already told you, and you agree that 72 acres might not be the right thing. So don't short circuit the process and just, shove it in for something that you're not even going to do right away. For reasons of, I think it's just practical convenience. I guess, at the end of all this, there is a question. The question is, why would you put 72 acres into the finding statement? What does it do for you? What is the benefit of that as opposed to this alternative path? I'd be interested in what the compelling rationale is, given, I think in the first year, 2 years, 3 years, it may not have any impact whatsoever. I think I've asked this before in other contexts, but what is the benefit of having a finding statement for the full 72 acres?
Well, first of all, allow Sabrina to answer some of this if she can, but, each one of us may have very different reasons why we want it. One of my concerns right now is no matter what I'm going to say to you, it's not going to be sufficient, and it's going to be probably twisted in some way.
You should not qualify. You should not. Please just answer the question and not presume whether I'm going to accept the answer or not.
We've actually discussed this back and forth, and one of the answers online, one of the answers that you actually referenced, I don't think it's I think it's been exaggerated in the sense of, and I've been typing, I apologize, that's what I've been doing when people are asked up here. I don't, let me sort of back up for a second. Your assumptions, I think, are wrong. So, for example, we don't want to be in an endless loop, and that's telling that clearly we're not ready to get there. That's not necessarily true, because an endless loop could be just people who will oppose this and don't want to see it go forward and will do anything to keep it moving along.
I think the endless loop was regard to corresponding with the planning board, kind of going back and forth and using
so
that expertise.
Let me finish. So why are we the exception to the rule if the norm is, and please tell me, Ed, if I'm wrong, if the norm is, and we're not an anomaly, that this is the process, it goes in this fashion, meaning we have our role, and there's an open period to comment, and then ultimately we have the finding statement, and it's not referring things out back and forth, back and forth. There's a reason why that's not the process, and Ed, not saying it can't happen, but the norm is absolutely not what is being asked. It doesn't mean that we can't engage other people in other boards. It doesn't mean we can't speak to them and ask them to share their thoughts. But to go back and forth doesn't get us where we need to be, because that's going to go on in perpetuity. But yes, we can certainly engage, and we want to engage. There's nothing preventing us from engaging. But Ed, if you can just be clear, it's coming across as if we are doing something atypical and wrong.
Well, I would say it's not just the norm, it's the law. secret designates a lead agency, not a committee. It's a lead agency that's tasked with doing certain things, and in many instances on a timeline to ensure that they get done in a timely manner. So decisions about completeness, finding statements, those are not done by committee. They're done by the lead agency. And the statute contemplates that the lead agency is not going to be an expert in all of the different areas that it has to look at, that it's going to rely on experts. And here, we were just during the break talking about, I was talking with Sabrina about just the depth of, on the professional staff here at Town Hall that do this stuff day in and day out and have done it for decades. So you have tremendous resources here that you can rely on that have been doing this job and dealing with these issues. Again, decades of experience. So that's the way the process works.
Resources that have opined on something of this magnitude in a town. I mean, look, why are we different? Because our downtown is tremendously idiosyncratic. It's got, constrained traffic flow. It's got its steep hills. I mean, for all the reasons that most people in this room think that what's being contemplated just doesn't work. I mean, you asked the question, that is why we're different. But, I think you're not answering the question I asked. The question I asked is, what is the benefit of, if we're just applying the form-based code to the 6 acres, what is the benefit of having a finding statement for the 72 acres?
All right, so my general response, and we don't have to go back and forth, and we can discuss this later on, but my general response.
No, it's not back and forth. You have to answer it first before we go back and forth.
Roger, I just said my general response is that I do think there's a benefit to it, because I do think there's a benefit to studying all of this, because there are folks who believe that we should consider different avenues to get us out of this inability to have any real development in town. What that means to you and means to me in terms of what development is, we could disagree. I think Chris, I saw before, he may not want something at all. He may say, hey, Jeremy, I disagree with you. We shouldn't have anything. I'm not saying that, but we should keep it the way it is, or we shouldn't expand it. But I think that this is an opportunity to be compliant with and follow up with the comprehensive plan, and to look at the hamlet where we want to concentrate housing, not disrupt the single-family homes, not disrupt the rural area. This is where any type of development should happen. And what the development will be, what we're doing with the analysis allows us to continue those conversations down the road.
You can make all those decisions in the future when you decide to have a form-based code on other areas, right? So the benefit is really just a matter of, I hate to say, it's just convenience. It just, means you're just gonna have to do a little bit more work when you make that decision down the road. So for a matter of convenience, you didn't answer the question I'm going to answer it for you. It is just purely for convenience. So you have to go with the inconvenient answer here, which is to have a finding statement for 6 acres. Sometimes the right answer is inconvenient, and you've used the word courage.
I would
It
disagree.
takes courage to arrive at the inconvenient right answer.
I would disagree with you. I appreciate that, what you're saying. I think it takes courage to speak here and you to speak to me and me tell you we disagree on where this is going. It is what it is. We can sit and go back and forth, and I appreciate that. But we're going to disagree. I appreciate what you're saying. It's not a matter of convenience. This is not all about convenience. So thank you, Roger.
Roger, I think the ship has sailed in terms of studying the whole 72 acres. That happened. That's what we're looking at now. But I agree, if what that is going to be applied to is only 6 acres, then the finding statement should only relate to 6 acres, because we're saying that because that's all we want to develop. You're right, it does open the door. If a finding statement applies to all 72 acres, then assuming what that finding statement says, it basically says, I believe, that there's no environmental impact that can't be overcome or that needs to be mitigated, and if it does, that mitigation is in the finding statement, but it would relate to the entire 72 acres, which then, to your point, does open the door to allow for future development in areas other than what's currently proposed in the form-based code.
I hate to let other people comment, and this is on top of my prior point, I'm not sure there is sufficient expertise to properly evaluate the full 72 acres right now. I mean, you're just scratching the surface now. And, I mean, you can solve this by just limiting it to the 6 acres. That's what you're doing. If you want to do more, evaluate that down the road.
I think that's what this sets the stage to do. The legislation is going to apply to the North Greeley corridor. And so we have the opportunity to see the outcome of that change before we expand the zoning to any future changes. I do think that the environmental impact statement is a valuable tool for the understanding of our options when it comes to the future of the hamlet and what the considerations need to be and what informs future choices in the hamlet. I think it has value for that purpose. It may be used as the foundation for a different zoning change that's not form-based code down the road with an amended EIS on top of it that would save costs to the town and time invested and capitalize on the efforts that have already been made.
I mean, I agree with Lori that knowledge is never a bad thing, right? It's always good to have information. But there's a difference between the EIS, the DGEI or the FGEIS, and a finding statement. Those are two different documents and they're different. And while having information about going back to stormwater management throughout the downtown is not a bad thing to know, and it can inform other decisions later on, to apply a finding statement to the whole 72 acres, I think is opening something up that we don't necessarily want to be opening up right now.
It's saying it's approvable.
Yes, it is.
And that's the word from the seeker site.
Yep.
And yet that is going to be on file. We could decide it's terrible, and that's going to be on file forever.
Right, if the whole thing's approved and it doesn't work, let's say we decide it doesn't work on North Greeley because there was a finding statement for the whole area, it could still technically be approved somewhere else.
And it can be used against the town.
Mhm.
And people will use things against the town. We've seen it. We've seen it time and time again.
Thank you, Roger.
I'm Ray Sanseverino. I live at 65 Carolyn Place, Chappaqua. I'm a commercial real estate attorney. I don't represent the town, so I'm not constrained, as Keenan Bean is, to talk about things that may be confidential, attorney-client privileged. I just want to say that if we do adopt the findings for the whole 72 acres, as sure as I'm standing here, developers will use it against us. They can, they have. I've seen it done. I've participated in taking these statements and using them to say you cannot stop me from developing the area outside the North Greeley corridor. So if we do it, you're really risking putting the town in a very bad position. You may think it's good, you may think it's beneficial, it may be convenient, but it's really going to be devastating to the town if some developer uses that and tries to develop something we don't think should be developed. Thank you.
My name's Margaret Ferguson, and I want to talk about something that's very important, which is the schedule. What is happening on August 30th now? Originally, it was the vote on the FGEIS. But I've heard comments that it's a work session. I saw that on the display. What is happening on August 30th?
We're continuing this conversation. There's still more sections to review. So
Is there a vote tentatively scheduled on the full FGEIS on August 30th?
I can't tell you what's going to happen on August 30th. All I can tell you is that it may continue, and it very well could continue. I haven't seen any additional information. I don't know when the town's going to have the opportunity to have it complete to us. So
Well, it sure seems, since you got 19 pages of text, that's all you had, and a very odd table of contents, I have to say, that was confusing with question marks. And the original, the draft GEIS, the text of that was 230 pages, and that doesn't account the appendices, and Ed said you're going to end up with a 1,000-page document. It sure seems not nearly impossible to complete it between now and August 30th. But the community has a right to know what the schedule is. If it's not feasible, tell us.
Okay, and again...
And when are we going to be told?
Maggie, I can't, I
don't
can't speak for the board or for the acting supervisor, but I can't imagine we're gonna vote on it on the 30th when we will not have discussed it before that.
Well, so tell us that. We see
I
a schedule,
don't-
not you, Lisa, I mean, have the town, tell us that. We have a tentative schedule that's still out there, this is the vote on the,
And we'll let you know. I have no, this is not hide the ball. We'll let you know. We're trying to figure it out too. We are, listen, I would have been thrilled if we had everything already and we had it weeks or months ago. We don't. So we have to adapt to, and if it means pushing things out, we'll push things out. There's no
and when will
objection to
we
that.
know?
I don't know. I don't know when we'll know, but I'll discuss it with council. I'll discuss it with our staff.
Okay, well,
And you'll certainly know, there's nothing to hide. I can't tell you when we're voting and when this is going to be ready to go. We had a tentative schedule and it was labeled tentative for a reason.
But realistically, given that we only
So-
discussed 19 pages, there's no way we
Right,
can
so-
vote on it.
so-
well,
I
okay,
don't
let's
know.
go on to, will the written comments start the day after the vote on the FGEIS? Or will it start at a later date?
I don't know that answer.
After if the document's accepted as complete, after the document's accepted as complete.
I don't think it's between. I can barely hear you, Ed, I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
my fault. So the question is, after the FGEIS
Yes.
is accepted as complete, when will the written comments be accepted?
Okay, so you were not here, it was Nick, and originally he said that the written comment period would start the day after they were accepted as complete. And he seemed to say that that's what seeker said, and I said, does seeker really say that? Or does seeker say you can't go to findings for 10 days? A minimum of 10 days.
I'd have to check to be sure.
Okay. We'd like to know if the written comment period is starting the day after the FGEIS. We'd like to know how long the written comment period is. 10 days is insanely short. And as I've laid out in other meetings, there's lots of life events in those first 2 weeks of September. Again, school starts, Labor Day, people may start commuting, or with COVID, who knows what's going on, but it's a very chaotic time. You also have Rosh Hashanah, you have the 20th anniversary of 9/11, you have Yom Kippur, and by the way, by the time you get to September 22nd and 23rd, my understanding is that those are both open house nights for, I believe, the elementary schools, and those are the two public engagement sessions. Well, one of them is on the night, I think, of the 22nd. So we have the right to be able to plan our lives, deal with a massively long document in a humane and reasonable time frame. And we should be told what it is. This is preposterous to hold us in abeyance for the schedule. And the written comment periods never appeared on a tentative schedule. Never. People don't even see that it's there. It could have been there, but there's no written comment period noted anywhere on any of the times that calendar has been posted. So I would ask that there be more transparency and more clarity on the schedule and to do it promptly. Don't wait another week. It's obviously not going to happen on the 30th. Tell people. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing. In terms of I just want to clarify, in the table of contents, are all the interested agency documents from the from the public comment period going to be included in the final GEIS? They're not listed right now. It says 512 letters, which are public residents. So the planning board and all those things, does that go into the the final GEIS as well?
I think they could either be referenced or actually appended. I think you have the option. So I don't know if we've made that decision yet.
So that would be the school district comments, that would be the planning board memo on the DGIS, all those things. I don't know how many.
Reports,
Well, when you look at on the Chappaqua Ford website, and they have the written comments, or public comments, I think it's called.
Those comments are included.
They're appendices, right?
Because they're not referenced in the current table of contents. It says list of comments, 512 letters.
Yes, they're included in that list of comments.
Okay, so we'll see all those interested agency comments. Will the planning board's, I think it's May 25th memo on the form-based code, will that be included?
I would assume so, yeah.
Well, it's not on the Chappaqua Ford website right now because it's May 25th. The Chappaqua Ford website cut off on March 25th.
Excuse me.
Could we have that posted on the Chappaqua Ford website, that memo?
Yeah, we can check.
Okay, I think it's May 25th, I'm not sure of the date. I appreciate that. And I think that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Warren Gottlieb, 8 Plymouth Road. I actually, one question I have a few questions, but Ed, I want to ask you a question about lead agency. Is there any limitation in seeker that prevents you from at any point during the process to supplement and add a co-lead agency? What would be involved in that?
It's possible to have a co-lead agency. It's very unusual. And if it's going to happen, it needs to happen at the outset of the process when there's a circulation and then a designation of lead agency or, again, occasionally co-lead agencies. But that's at the front end. That's not
Okay, you can't. All right, so if we wanted to add the planning board now as a co-lead agent, okay, that's too bad. Okay, thank you. I have just 3 areas I just wanted to cover. The first is regarding the ethics board. I noticed on the town website that we have an ethics board of, it shows 3 members. But I looked at Chapter 9 of the town code, and it indicates that, I think this is Section 914, or Chapter 914, that the ethics board should consist of 5 members approved by the town board. And they're each supposed to serve for a term of 3 years. And it looks like we only have 3 right now. So I just had a few questions on that. First of all, are there vacancies now? Because I don't want to assume that the website is correct. Okay, that's the first thing. The second is, has the town received applications for those vacancies, and have they interviewed those applicants? Do we know the answer to that?
We have not interviewed. We may have received applications.
Oh.
I do. We did receive some applications.
Okay. I mean, is there a timetable for filling those?
I'm sorry. I'm typing things, sorry.
That's okay. I know, I'm asking you a question.
So is there a time frame? No, but if there's a vacancy, I think we should absolutely move the ball forward. Yeah, so
I do
100%.
I do
So,
think
yes,
that there
we should
are a
move
number
forward.
of boards for which we do need to buckle down and review applications and do interviews. It's not just that one.
Okay. No, I know.
There's a number of boards that have vacancies, and that is something that we need to catch up on.
Yeah, this has been an issue on and off for years. I mean, yes,
Okay,
we
that one is
absolutely-
actually important. I think a lot of them are important, but that one's definitely.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. My next area I wanted to address are Zoom protocols, and this kind of feeds into, like, if we are having a resurgence of COVID relating to the Delta variant, I think not knowing what the future is going to hold as far as what meetings are going to look like again, and I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to be sustainable. I actually think, I know that there are minimum standards that the state required last time as far as what has to happen, but I also know that the board often looks at these standards as a floor and not a ceiling as to what has to be done or what should be done and how we conduct ourselves. So I have a few points I would like the board to consider if we have to go back to all Zoom, and here they are. Number one, I would like to have, and this is also to the extent technologically this can happen. Okay, I'm not sure all of these things can be done. Some of them I know they can. First of all, can you permit all Zoom participants to see the names of all of the attendees present in the Zoom? The same way that they would see all the attendees, like we see them here today physically, so that we know who was at the meeting. Just, it's an open meeting, we should be able to see who's present in town hall. The second is, can we permit all Zoom participants to see the names of all digital hands that are raised and waiting to comment? I mean, people should fairly be able to see that. If there's a line, nobody should have to worry that they're not getting called on because they can't see from their side what's going on. That shouldn't be. And I'm not suggesting that that's what's going on, but I just think that would be a better practice. The third is, I would ask that you leave the chat window open so that the attendees who are attending the meeting can communicate with one another. If you don't want to be hearing from everybody in the meeting sending you messages all at once like that I understand. But the people at the meeting, the same way here, if I want to go and whisper something to somebody, I can go do that. There should be a way, I think, to achieve that with Zoom. I would hope that there would be. And also just please be mindful of not cutting off either, just making sure that people are actually finished before cutting off their speaking, and have indicated that they got their response satisfactory. 'Cause sometimes people speak, they ask a question, they're clearly not getting the response that they want, and then we're moving on to the next thing. I think we have to make sure we don't do that to people. And the last thing is I just want to make sure also if people want to get up a second time or a third time, that they're allowed to do that as long as they're not being abusive about it. Sometimes people have something after they're listening for a bit that they're thinking about. So I hope, and I'm going to come back to you on this because I actually think this is important because, again, I don't know what we're going to be facing, and if we are going into the fall, and particularly with all of this going on, I think we really have to get this buttoned up.
Warren, I think, Ed can correct me if I'm wrong, because of the open meetings law, I think we can only have virtual meetings if the governor declares a state of emergency, right, and allows us to do that?
We actually had an internal meeting this week on this very issue, and I imagine we'll be coming back to the board with some guidance on that, but I don't have any new information for you tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
But I do think perhaps there's some elements of these requests that could be applied to a hybrid meeting, to our hybrid meeting.
Oh,
format
absolutely.
in the meantime.
Thank
I
you.
think that if technology allows, we can consider some of these things.
And my last point is just quick. First of all, I know we just talked about dates, and it sounds to me like things are not going to be what are on that tentative schedule, and that's fine. The one thing I would ask is that with respect to community engagement sessions and public hearings, with respect to any aspect of the secret process for the form-based code, that the town board present what are the proposed rules with respect to the format of how those sessions are going to be run, how long you're going to get a chance to speak, what the back and forth is going to be with respect to the residents and the board, so that we don't, ideally, I think the community should have some chance to comment on those proposals before we even start that process, because I know the last time around, I understand that you could be here till 3 o'clock in the morning with some of this stuff, and I get that, but there's a reason for that, because people do want to be heard, and I think it's cutting people at 3 minutes, not necessarily having an exchange. I think it's creating a dynamic that may be counterproductive to the process. And so I would urge you to, I've lived here like 16 years, and I remember when we used to have meetings like this for Chappaqua Crossing, people got up, they said their piece, and I think they generally felt like at the end of the day, they might not have liked what they heard back, but they were heard and there was a good exchange. I think we have to be really careful, particularly with something like this, to not constrict people too much, because I think that will just lead to a reaction of, hey, they're not listening to me, and I don't think that's really what you want. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Suzanne Chazen, Ludlow Drive in Chappaqua. I just had a couple questions. I mean, when we started this whole process, one of the big things I kept hearing was that this was all about, the form-based code was all about having vitality of the town and revitalizing the town. And I just sat at the beginning of the meeting and heard about how the town's in great economic shape. The town got tremendously complimented on how great an economic shape it's in. So it's a little hard for me to balance. We really need this for the town to remain vital, like we're a dying community, when actually we're doing pretty well. So that's my first thought. Another thing, just want to share with you, I realize, as Jeremy has said many times, this is not a development plan. However, let's be realistic. This is a plan so that we can have development. And we had a situation that just happened in Mount Kisco with Kirby Commons. We had a gigantic thing, 229 apartments, mixed-use residential. Everybody thought they were on board, except it was not a great situation. And the town board, just by one vote, said no. Even with lowering the size, they recognized it was wrong. And I just want to read, if you give me 1 second, I have to get my glasses, sorry. But there is actually, this was what one of the board members said, and I think it perfectly satisfies what we're talking about too. Sorry, I can't get it to go smaller, so I could actually read it. It says, personally, I think the financial proposal is so deficient and the traffic issues are so significant and the commuter parking issues are so significant that I'm not willing to go ahead. This was from one of the town board members in Mount Kisco. And I think that's a voice of reason here. I also am really concerned about the notion of completeness. I understand there's a procedure. I understand what these procedures are. But there's a way of something being complete and never answering a question. I know as a journalist that a lot of times the problem isn't getting your questions answered. The problem is not knowing the right question to ask. And if you don't know the right question to ask because you don't have the experience, you'll never get that answer. So is it complete? Did you ask someone everything and they answer it? Yes, but you may not have known what to ask them so that they never answered it. Is it complete? Yes, it's complete, but you've missed a whole area. And I'm not saying all of you are very experienced people, but not engineers. There's this very technical stuff. A lot of this stuff is difficult. At the very least, I would say, and you guys have been bringing it up tonight, that I think you need a lot of stuff before you get to the finding statement. I think all that stuff with the planning board and everything, however you do it, has to be done before a finding statement, not after. Once you said the finding statement, it's kind of like now you're putting on another layer on a cake that you've already finished. It doesn't work. So I think it's really important to be cognizant that you're carrying the entire 18,000 people in this community, many of whom by the public comments don't want this. And now you're carrying them forward, many against their will. I think that's a heavy burden of responsibility, and it requires you to take it very seriously. And if you need things, and if you think you don't know the question to ask because it's complete, but you don't know what that answer or that question is, please do ask before you get to the finding statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And just to clarify, Ed, that is the process.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were saying that the planning board and things would be consulted after the findings because they had to do the findings without that. I misunderstood. Did I misunderstand that? I thought the whole thing was that when Lisa was asking about the planning board, she was told that you can always do that afterwards, but you find the finding statement. You can informally ask, but there's no way you can really do that before. Did I misunderstand that?
If I understand correctly, I might not. The questions have been asked. So in terms of what the questions are, that's not going to change at this point.
But the answer that the consultants give, maybe not, there may be questions about the answer, like Lisa brought up tonight, where, there's a question about whether there's an environmental impact and the answer was, it's complete or it's enough. And that may not be as much of an answer, and that's maybe not an example for the planning board, but something where you might need additional information that you don't even know you don't know. Like when I read the public comments from the planning board, I look at them and go, wow, I didn't even think about that. That's something I've never thought of. Why would I? It's not my field. It's not my expertise. So I'm saying I think it's absolutely reasonable for you to take as much time as you need to ask people who might have more experience in this before you come to the finding statement. And maybe I misunderstood that, but I thought that's what I was hearing. So.
My takeaway from the discussion we had earlier was that if this board comes to a response that it believes it needs more input on from a planning board, from a zoning board, then if there was a consensus for reaching out and tapping that resource and getting an assist with respect to a particular response, we could do that. We would make that happen. That was my understanding of.
Right, but Ed, I think what she was saying was expressing concern that we wouldn't have input prior to the finding statement. What you described earlier is that once the environmental impact statement is declared complete, then we get all kinds of input that precedes the finding statement.
I'm suggesting that if there's going to be a request or a solicitation for input from another board, agency, an interested agency, that happened before the FGEIS is accepted as complete, not after.
Not after the finding.
Right, it should be before.
Right. So, for example, if something comes up, let's just say for argument's sake, that we don't get through the 950 pages during the next work session, and a question comes up with respect to one of the responses, then before that appears again on another agenda, we'll have reached out and taken the steps to try to get you that information.
Okay, thank you.
Make one suggestion. Warren Gottlieb again. One suggestion I would have, I think maybe would help the process a bit. I think residents are very concerned about this, and they want to know what's going on, and they want to know the things that, like the planning board memo has been very instructive, because there are questions being asked that people don't know to even think, they don't know the issues to think about. Not because they're not smart, they just don't do this stuff every day. I mean, what if you identified, certainly no more than 5, but 2 or 3 of the lead agencies, whether they be Chappaqua Central School District or the Planning Board, and you had joint work sessions on, on this document. I mean, take the time to do that and do it in a transparent, public way, because that, I think, will kind of get rid of a lot of the anxiety that's coming with this, which is that, people want to make sure that all of the issues are being addressed, so just lay it out there and do it. I mean, if the town board feels that this is, this has merit, then, then lay it out there and lay it out there for the community, and I think, that might be a better way to go here.
Thank you.
Hi, hi, Lynn Lambert, 27-year resident, neighbor of Lori Morton, 55 Ridgewood Terrace.
Special designation.
Absolutely. So I was glad to hear people sort of indicate that we were going to take more time to get the information we needed, because I've really been in a panic trying to seeing what we have so far, and recognizing that now I have the number, something like over 400 of the substantive comment letters that we submitted still haven't been addressed. I am somebody who's been on nonprofit boards for a total of about 35 years. I'm on 2 now, including a $2 billion pension fund. So I'm used to certain kinds of processes, and this process is just mind-boggling to me. I would have expected that after all those comments, what we saw in the rudimentary now FGEIS would include those comments and responses to those comments, but it doesn't. I mean, the only thing that was a big thing that I noticed was, 5 stories is off the table. Thank God for that. We're down to 4, but many of us believe that 3 would be appropriate, and Ben Herman, among other people, did some of the math to indicate that we would have development with a cap of 3 stories, and we know we have it at 91 Bedford, as an example. And nearby communities also have capped out at 3 and still gotten development. So I've been sitting here thinking, we could be complete by the standards we're hearing, but we could also be wrong. I don't think that it makes sense at this point, when there have been all these comments and we've paid twice to have those comments addressed with possible remediations or just facts that we're lacking in the comments. It doesn't make sense to rush now to get to the document that is ultimately going to be voted on. I don't know why there would be a problem, since all this information from a lot of people with a lot of experience in their work lives and our other interested entities like the planning board. Why didn't that stuff show up already? I'm very confused by that. And so some of the things that I didn't see addressed at all, and maybe this is coming, so forgive me, but the financial impact on residents of this the form-based code, that what maybe a range of things that could happen depending on the level of development. the displacement of local retailers and of the current low-income downtown residents, the lack of mandated workforce housing. It just said workforce housing, moved on. It was like, what? What? We know what it would be for affordable housing. We've got a stepping stone there, which looks like a good start, but it just said, and workforce housing. And it's like, what? Aren't we gonna, that's all how we're gonna address that, you know? And yes, the environmental things, the loss of some of our sight lines where we get to see the local hills and changing of the leaves and a lot. So I don't understand this document. I'm sure I'm not the only one. It's like, this is all we've got after you guys told us, Lauren, too. You told us, tell us your thoughts. We are listening. And I really wanted to believe that because I believe in process and I believe in our elected government and how it works and how it should work. And so right now it feels like, but who was listening when this document was created? Because we've still got 400 letters that haven't even been dealt with by our consultants, again, not to beat a dead horse, but that we've now paid for twice. Shouldn't that information and the maybe projected remediations of some of the problems that have been identified, shouldn't that be here? Shouldn't that document that gets crafted after all this is taken into account be what you're looking at? So sorry if I'm misunderstanding the process. I'm sure I am in some ways, but in terms of spiritually, I'm not. In terms of spiritually, this just feels wrong. And I hope you just take the time that you need right now to get us the best possible document we can get, to hear what was said here today. And those letters, again, that we're waiting for a response to. So thank you for your time listening to me, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. My understanding is that every document that has been shared with the public to date is a work in progress and incomplete. So the draft form-based code that was shared a few weeks ago was updated for sections around process, and the board discussed those changes. But that document did not reflect all of the study and analysis because we're still waiting to review it as a board to address those components of the form-based code legislation. And then what has been shared for this evening's meeting is a fraction of the environmental impact statement and the response to comments. There were comments from the public incorporated in there with the citation to the person who asked those questions. And my understanding is that the completion of that process means that every single comment, concern, question that was asked through this 2-year-long process is included in the final environmental impact statement and answered.
Can I ask just a real quick question on that point? Okay, sorry. And I know it's getting late for everyone, thank you. I know I saw the reference to all the letters that people sent in, but we also had the comments that I think were supposed to be addressed, the 3-minute little segments that everyone had when they called in that were not, I think in lieu of letters. I'm curious, how is that going to be incorporated and addressed? It seems like it's a different mechanism by which comments were given.
So if I understood from the table of comments, they're incorporated as from the minutes of those meetings?
We have transcripts.
Oh, so transcripts of the questions that were,
Correct.
of the 3-minute,
Yes,
okay,
the comments.
okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Carrie,
One last question, I'm sorry. I promise this last one. My understanding was that as of July 8th, that there was a draft of the FGEIS that had been received by the town. Not necessarily in its current form, but there was a draft received from Kimley. Didn't they have to deliver that to us by then?
There's not a complete draft. We have working on sections.
Okay. Do we have a percentage of it? Is it 10% done, 50% done?
I'd be guessing, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, one thing that also might be helpful here too is if there are chunks of this that are done that are coming in, also maybe just even if the documents are subject to change, start sending them to the interested agencies. I mean, I know the school board, they have a lot of stuff on their plate, so does the planning board, and sort of a lot of these interested agencies. I mean, start getting this stuff to them, because I think that all that's doing is kind of making this a little bit, tougher on you. Get it to them, let them review it. Maybe they'll be beneficial in that process, but if you don't get that to them, and then all of a sudden people start screaming, we don't have enough time, no one's looked at this, well, the reason why they haven't seen it, so please try and get it to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie, do we have any people online?
Yeah, I was just gonna say Eileen Gallagher is online.
If you can bring whomever's online, thank you.
Eileen Gallagher?
We'll get to everyone.
We'll get to everyone. Sarah?
Hi, is it my turn? Sorry.
Yes, we hear you.
Hi. Okay, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I just wanted to listen into the work session, but you guys started discussing, you were giving really, really careful consideration to the topic of nighttime filming, and you were wondering, is it okay with the neighbors? And you were talking about, getting all of their approval. And I was just sitting and I was listening to it with my mouth hanging open in shock, because I'm remembering the streetscape project, and I'm remembering all of the people that lived and continue to live in this area that you are studying right now for the form-based code. And I remember many of us coming in and complaining about the noise, and not just the daytime noise, but the nighttime noise. And not just till 11 p.m. or not just till 1 p.m., but I mean all night long. I mean backhoes, I mean tearing up the streets, I mean chipping away at concrete and tearing up sidewalks. And it was such a complete disregard for the residents that live near town. And I know at this point I sound a little bit like a broken record, but the families that live near town, they deserve the same consideration as everybody else that lives here. We pay taxes too. I've lived here coming up on 8 years, and I'm just scared out of my mind that the noise and disruption that form-based code has the potential to cause to the many, many people that live in and around what you call the study area, but what we might call downtown Chappaqua. Because like you said, noise carries, and it's disruptive. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I have a great deal of empathy for this point in particular, because I lived on Mill River Road during the replacement of the bridge. Actually came to town hall with an infant and a toddler, because there was pounding into granite for the entirety of the night, every single night, for several years of their young childhood. So I am very empathetic to this issue.
I have a theory that may be the reason that the family that lived in my house before me sold their house. They were here only 2 years, and we live in what I consider to be one of the best locations in Chappaqua. And I just missed the bridge work, but we got hit twice. We got hit with that bridge work, which I wasn't here for, and then we got hit with the streetscape, and it's just like a nonstop barrage of noise and disruption for the people that live near town. And there's a lot of us. And it feels so very wrong.
So Sarah, I have a theory that it's the reason that my kids are really good sleepers now, but I think it took a couple of years off of my own life.
Right.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. If we can have the next person.
Good evening.
Hi, Ed.
So, I've been hearing a lot of discussion this evening, and it seems like it's all based upon the fact that a charrette was never held. And a charrette, just to read it to you, is an intensive planning session where citizens, designers, and others collaborate on a vision for development. It provides a forum for ideas and offers the unique advantage of giving immediate feedback to the designers. More importantly, it allows everyone who participates to be a mutual author of the plan. And that would include such people as developers, business interests, government officials, interested residents. And speaking of business interests, you may have seen not too long ago a letter to the examiner where the owner of Squires had issues about the form-based code. And had a charrette been held, all of those things would have been known well in advance, and they were not. Also, as far as parking goes, as the consultants know, we have a high groundwater table here in Chappaqua. It's in a valley next to the Sawmill River. As you stand in town, you look either way, you can see the high mountains with green trees on it. And just about a month ago, there's, I don't know if you know it, but there's two retail stores on Lower King Street that have basement crawl spaces. One is the restaurant that is closed due to a fire, and the other one, King's Scribe, there was somebody pumping out water from the basement crawl space onto King Street. So what's the alternative that I've read in the form-based code? Stacker, hydraulic, and robotic parking. You know, this is not New York City, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, or Baltimore. It's a rural village, a hamlet, and those kind of parking structures don't belong here, even though it says in the form-based code, well, it could be behind the building. But what about the neighbors who are looking at a stacker, hydraulic, or robotic parking structure? That's not fair to them. And for people who don't live in the town, well, they maybe should have more empathy for the people who do live in town. And one other comment I would make, apparently, if the whole, I understand that the new direction is only North Greeley Avenue. I get that. But studying the entire area, 72 acres, it doesn't stop another future town board from coming in and processing that other area. And people who live in Millwood, who live on the west end of the town of Newcastle, should not think that this is only a problem for people in Chappaqua, because Millwood could be next. The Millwood lumber yard has closed. That's a very large piece of property that could be developed. And the area around the former Millwood firehouse is a lot of open area there. And then where across the street from the more recent condominiums on that road between the Chicos and the firehouse, all that open property could be developed. And then going up Millwood, up Route 100, I think the people at Pheasant Run should be concerned about how much more traffic. So what I'm saying is, today it's Chappaqua, tomorrow it could be Millwood. I think it's a big error what's going on here. And the reason I'm not hearing answers to very good questions presented by the speakers is simply because a charrette wasn't held. None of these questions should be asked. They should have all been answered and dealt with at the charrette. Thank you, and have a good night.
Okay, whoever's next.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
It's hard to tell from my end. Okay. I had thought of something, and now that Ed Frank is talking, I realize my idea, I guess, is to have a charrette. I guess this is what a charrette is. I had thought about, and I would be very, very willing to take part in, helping to put something like this together. But I thought that having some facilitated, open, unbiased brainstorming session, so meaning, held by maybe League of Women Voters or somebody who could kind of bring everyone together, because there's a lot of passion on all sides. And I think that's pretty evident, between social media and meetings and even neighbors talking to neighbors. There's a lot of passion going on. And if this has taught me anything, it's that our town has a wealth of creative, brilliant, dedicated residents who have shown their level of engagement throughout the worst, in my lifetime, these have been the worst 2 years, 2020 and 2021. And because of the isolation and the lockdowns, because of people being sick, people losing loved ones, people losing jobs, it's been horrific. We all know that. So if people can be this active and engaged in such horrible times, think of the wealth of information we could share and ideas that could be exchanged. So nobody is saying, let's not do any development. But if we could come together, I have met people I would never have met before. And for this, I am grateful. For this issue, I'm grateful only because I have met the most amazing, amazing people. And if we could all come together to, if that means cutting buildings down to 3 stories, if that means limiting this, the study to the 6-8, whatever it means, it would just go so far in restoring the confidence of people in town that they are being heard. And I know it's really hard. I know, think about, if you have kids and your kids are like, are you listening to me? And half the time you're just like, oh my God, just go to bed or whatever. I know it's hard. But and I've got kids and dogs, so I go through it with them all. But it would go so far to have people know, and it's nothing against you, but I'm saying to have people know, listen, we're being heard. We're exchanging ideas. We're collaborating. That's what's been missing, I think. And I don't think it's intentional. I do think that people had the best of intentions, but people were not engaged because they just didn't know about any of this. And I think, I was a little bit concerned before when I heard, we can't keep going around in loops and loops. And I think it was Roger Klepper that said something like, that's telling you something. It's saying that there are an awful lot of people that have very valid concerns. And, like I said, I would be more than willing, I don't know what it takes, but gosh, I would be more than willing to put in the effort to help put together something like that if you guys would be willing to, to do this. I don't think it's too late to do this. I think that it's never too late to add on, to this process. I'm not trying to make more work for anyone, but I do think that people could really be on board with this. And, I know Jill mentioned before, and it's true, that the board has always been very gracious with our residents. That was a quote from Jill when you were talking about the parking tickets or whatever. I think it would be awesome to show, yes, we are gracious, we are listening, this is what we're going to do. And I think at this point, everybody is so laser focused on it that people would be singing your praises, and that's not why you'd be doing it. I think you'd be doing it for everyone's benefit.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eileen. I appreciate your comments and your thoughts, and I say that sincerely whether I agree or not, but I do appreciate what you're sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Cynthia Moses. Just unmute yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, hi Cynthia.
Hi, it's Cynthia, 100 Glendale Road. Greetings from the West End. I'm incredibly impressed by the community engagement for these Chappaqua issues, but just want to say hello and remind everyone about the West End and talk about Sunshine Home, which is actually, for those who don't know, the largest construction project going on in the town at this time, and is quite behind schedule. And I empathize with everyone dealing with noise, because the noise in the woods sound very much like the noise in New York City in terms of construction. So my neighbors and I are continuing to deal with that, and it includes rock drilling, removal, large equipment, constant backup noise, working 6 days a week, things like that. Whenever Sunshine has appeared before the town for permits and extensions and so forth, they're constantly late. Sometimes they're past the expiration date of the actual permit, and sometimes they forget to apply for permits, such as the most recent one, a tree permit for cutting down trees. So as we move along year after year, the ZBA and the planning board continue to rubber stamp all of these permit extension requests, even though they don't approach the town in the proper way, and the project is overdue. And they argue things like COVID, set them back. But I will tell you that Governor Cuomo allowed all health facilities to proceed with their construction projects, so that's not the case. So I've talked about the other ones. I want to talk about tree permit. Most recently, I received a certified piece of mail that actually was a Town of Newcastle neighbor notification form, notice of intent to remove trees. There was no indication of Sunshine Home on the form, just the address, Spring Valley Road LLC, and there was no indication of how many trees. So I thought that I would call Mr. DePole, who was lovely with me. Thank you very much, Mr. DePole, the environmental coordinator, to just ask, well, why am I getting certified mail? I know it's 3 trees or more in good condition, and you need to apply for a permit. And he said, well, it's 18 trees, but that Sunshine had portrayed them as possibly a danger to the existing space that they operate in, and not part of the limit of disturbance of the construction site. My count right now is over 40 trees on top of the trees that they got approvals to cut. I'm wondering how that gets accounted for, how the town communicates with the residents of this area who really do care about the environment and trees, to let us know, update us. When I go to the Newcastle website, I request that maybe somebody double check your projects of interest page, which gives an individual page to Sunshine Home, which has not been updated with permit extensions, etc. at all. The most recent update is 2019. The only area that updates is the required well monitoring piece of their construction approvals. And honestly, even the well monitoring, as far as I can see, it's always quite late. The most recent quarterly offsite report for wells around the project goes back to the fourth quarter of 2020. The most recent monthly offsite numbers are from May, June.
Cynthia,
The
what
most
I
recent-
suggest, and it's not, we're not the lead agency, but I'll follow up.
No,
and
I know,
see.
but I don't have
I'll see
access
why-
to the
I'll
lead
see that we can
agency
get these things
because I
updated.
can't get on their
Well,
agenda.
yeah,
But I
I'll-
want to emphasize, however, that quarterly updates for Sunshine Home are not updated since December 2020 for water. I think that's wrong. Nobody in this area knows if they finally did, install their radium filtration system for
Cynthia,
the water that
I
their
don't mean
kids
to-
are drinking.
Cynthia, you're going to, I'm not disputing what you're saying, but this is not before us, so it's hard for me to speak to it other than to say that I'll certainly follow up to see why this information is not available. Whatever you're listing, I'm not disputing that specifically,
Well,
but
one
in terms
thing
of process,
I will
I'll follow
already
up.
put forward, and I do worry for the folks concerned about the Chappaqua potential expansions, is that the developer was put in charge of the updates on their website. That was the deal with the town, that they would do their week-to-week updates. And honestly, it is deplorable. Their updates are totally insufficient. There are no discussions of tree removals. Every week it says, through the months of July and August and September, we will continue. And they don't even discuss the kind of noise that the community hears on a regular basis.
So again, Cynthia, I'm not up to date on this because we're not the lead agency, but we'll follow up to see why it's not up to date and accessible. So I
And
appreciate
where
your
would I
comment.
follow up? I understand Mr. DePaul explaining that the 18 trees were not within the
Cynthia,
field of disturbance, but they
Cynthia,
really are. Where
Cynthia,
does that go to?
Cynthia, I don't want to go in circles, and I say this too because I'm just not familiar with this project. This is not something we're overseeing, but I will follow up and try to get those answers to you and update the process.
So Jill, for
Okay,
projects
I'll
of-
go one step slightly in a different direction and one step further.
So Cynthia,
In
can you hold
June-
for just 1 second? I just wanted to ask Jill a question. So for projects of note on the town website, how does that get updated? How is that meant to be updated?
We just have to provide the information for Carrie, and Carrie will take it updated. So I will be talking to Tom tomorrow and just.
Okay, terrific. So then we should be able to get that updated, and then if there are other projects of note that aren't updated, we can make sure we do that, because that is important to have that transparency.
So, thank you. And I'll slightly switch direction. In June 2021, Westchester County put out recommendations or guidance for shelter in place for local jurisdictions, which I appreciate. There are 3 categories of importance included during conditions of hazardous materials release. Well, we live within the 10-mile zone of Indian Point. Active shooter, we're in the woods, and the Chappaqua police are 21 minutes away. Inclement weather, such as severe storms, you all know how the West End gets, totally shut down by trees and ice and snow and so forth. So I asked during this project's review for their shelter-in-place program, which apparently is a requirement of the process anyway. I would ask that you post that shelter-in-place review and have it match the guidance of Westchester County.
Again, the response to this all, Cynthia, is I will certainly, and Jill's already referenced that she will follow up and pursue this. We will make sure as best we can that the information is up to date. Unfortunately, I'm not able to speak to you about the specifics because it's not before us, and I'm just not as.
And I understand that. I feel like the West End needs to come and share with you what's happening in the West End from time to time. And this project is the largest project Newcastle has going right now.
So I'm going to ask Jill another question. So Jill, for these kinds of like emergency management protocols for, let's say, this kind of facility or similar residential facilities in the community, is there a place that the town has that, or how do you know how that gets filed? Does that just get filed with the state?
Gets filed with the state, but
Okay.
we can certainly take a look at it and see what it is. and updated. Yeah.
I mean, I think we just want to know that it's being handled appropriately, I guess.
Yes, the
Right,
West End does too, because emergency services, generally speaking, have to deal with a whole lot, and they're volunteer groups. So, when you approve a commercial entity in this residential area, there needs to be preparedness for emergencies. That goes along with approval of that many more people and people with disabilities living in our community.
Absolutely.
They need to be cared for.
Thank,
So in all, I'm just asking for more oversight, and with the trees, I'm asking to figure out how we go about that kind of review so that the tree replanting plan is properly tended to.
thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Carrie?
That's it for now.
All right, so Jill, what do we have now?
Our consent agenda items.
All right, we went through them before. Does anyone want to have anything off specifically and separate?
No.
Okay. All right, so then we're up to resolutions.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of authorization to accept retirement, Newcastle Police, authorization to hire Newcastle Police, adoption of monthly reports for July, authorization to adopt basketball court rental fees, authorization to charge firing fee for adult ceramics classes, resolution authorizing acceptance of the cash bond agreement 10 Cynthia Court, authorization to settle 2015 to 2020 tax certiorari proceedings for Gravardi Corporation, resolution in support of the town of Newcastle's New York State Energy Research and Development Agency's Clean Energy Communities points-based grant, authorization to purchase water meters, DPW water unit, authorization of final payment and retainage release to D&M Electrical Contracting, Inc., authorization to award contract for professional engineering services Bedford Hills Pump Station, resolution authorizing the class of 2013 to 2014 outstanding parking tickets as uncollectible, authorization to renew contract with Logically, authorization to accept the annual comprehensive financial report and independent auditors report, PKF O'Connor Davies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $340,321.69 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail report, both dated August 9th, 2021. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, August 11th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that
Is any
it?
supplemental ones?
Excuse me?
No supplemental?
No.
All right, so someone can move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Second, if I may. I'm aware of at least one comment that was sent in that the author has to be read at the meeting. What is the policy and comments that were asked to be read?
I don't know if,
No, it's not a public hearing, so it doesn't have to get read into the record. It will be part of the minutes. It will be noted as put in.
So is it going forward, is the idea that if people ask that if they can't attend and they can't participate in Zoom, that it will not be read during?
We don't usually read it unless it is a public hearing and it gets read into the record, but this isn't a public hearing.
but it will be made part of the record.
We do have them here, and we will make them part of the record.
All right.
Right, it's just that it's different than being read, where people might be watching their Zoom, able to watch a video later on. It's a totally different thing. People don't even know where to find minutes, or it's just a
They're right on
different
the
thing.
website. We keep them.
I understand that. I actually do look at the minutes on the website, but I'm one of the few, I'm sure. It's a different
That's
thing.
not true.
Well, it's different than having it read into the record, so I would ask that in the future you consider reading residents' comments that are sent in and asked to be read into the record. I think that's part of engagement. If they can't be here, I know one person's out of town, and she tried twice to have it sent into the record, and today's the second time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.